On a secluded, man-made island, April Carlisle embarks on a high-stakes undercover mission involving powerful individuals and seductive schemes. Surrounded by the elite, including the enigmatic Brenda Roker and the charismatic Sal Giordano, April plays a delicate game of manipulation and desire. Here, her professional skills blend with personal connections as she uncovers hidden motives and simmering tensions among her targets. As April becomes entangled in intimate alliances and faces both allies and threats, she must keep her wits to navigate the dangerous dynamics. But will she uncover the truth or lose herself along the way? The next day was milder than the previous ones, with some clouds overhead. It was a nice change from feeling like she had to hide or deal with intense heat. Still, April slathered on sunscreen. The sun here was strong and needed respect. Breakfast was a delightful buffet with salmon, poached eggs, and a variety of tasty treats. Mario had really outdone himself. Everyone had finally gotten up by 10 and was enjoying the gentler morning sun while chatting happily. The women had opted for simple swimwear, with Paula, Sam, and Astrid wearing just the essentials. After breakfast, Martin Steele stood up and said, "I hope you all rested well last night," sharing knowing glances with the group, some faces turning a bit red. "Today is activity day. We'll be spending time on the water, trying out paragliding and water skiing and doing a bit of fishing. Let's see if we can catch some dinner." A soft laugh spread through the group, and everyone exchanged looks, murmuring together. "Get ready, folks. We leave in 20 minutes. April leaned back, relieved she wasn't going. She was still tired from the night before, and water skiing wasn't her favorite activity. She had been to some lakes while in college in Arizona, but every time she tried to swim, she ended up drinking water by accident. It was something she just couldn't manage, so she decided to sit it out. As she relaxed with her eyes closed, she felt a shadow above her. She opened her eyes to see Brenda Roker standing over her. "Tara, could I ask you for some help?" April admired how Brenda spoke. Her words were always so clear and precise. "Of course." "Oh, not right now. I'm not joining the others. Those activities don't really interest me." April noticed that Brenda seemed to be specific about her preferences. What kind of activities would she like? How about in 20 minutes? I just want to finish my coffee." "Great, I'll meet you on the deck." April smiled at that. "I have no clue. With how the guys are around here, calling it that could lead to issues." Brenda laughed as she walked away. April understood who Brenda was. She was an online college professor at a well-known university. Her focus was digital architecture, teaching everything from 3D design to creating virtual worlds for movies and video games. People considered her brilliant, smart, and serious on the outside, but she had a sharp sense of humor when she chose to show it. She was also very good at promoting herself, always eager to speak or give interviews whenever she had the chance. 20 minutes later, April was by the massage bed, watching two small boats speed off into the distance after she helped load them with gear. Martin Steele winked at her as they left and said, "Relax, take it easy. Tonight we celebrate," in a cheerful way. Brenda came into view, and April looked her over again. She had long, thick chestnut hair, was tall and graceful, and probably weighed around 130 pounds. Not bad for 54, April thought. She hoped to look that good at that age. Brenda had chosen to go without a top for the first time on this trip, and wore a sarong. With the sun behind her, it was clear she wasn't wearing any swim bottoms either. Brenda smiled at April and hopped onto the bed, lying on her stomach. April asked, "Are there any tense spots you want me to focus on?" "No, just general tension. I have a big deadline coming up, and it's making me a bit anxious." April applied some lotion and began the massage, starting at Brenda's shoulders. She quickly found tight spots around her shoulder blades. April observed the typical muscle tension in Brenda's shoulders, which wasn't surprising, given the physical demands of their current environment. As she worked through the knots, April slipped into a casual line of conversation, something she'd honed over years in her profession, much like a barber or taxi driver engaging in light small talk to fill the time. "You seem a bit out of place here," April commented, choosing her words carefully. She was curious about Brenda's response, especially after reviewing her profile. Her goal was to see if Brenda would be open or guarded. Brenda's reply was a bit muffled. Do I? April smiled. Everyone else is mingling, having fun. You mostly just watch. Brenda nodded. This is a great place to people watch, isn't it? April chuckled. True. So you aren't one to join in? Brenda raised an eyebrow. You, on the other hand, seem right at home with all this. You're even comfortable enough to get along with others here like Kim and Rashid, from what I saw. April shrugged lightly, keeping her tone neutral. They certainly have an interesting dynamic. Brenda seemed intrigued. Do they? April noticed the conversation slipping away from her initial goal. She decided to bring the focus back. What about John? Is he enjoying himself? Brenda sighed, leaning into the question. Oh, John always finds a way to enjoy himself. It's his specialty. Hedonist, huh? April remarked lightly. Brenda pushed herself up slightly, glancing back at April. See his hair? It takes him 45 minutes every morning. Vain, self-centered, and honestly calling him a hedonist is putting it mildly. April stayed quiet, letting the silence draw Brenda to share more. After a pause, Brenda settled back down with a sigh. I'd find it funny and leave in a heartbeat if I didn't love him. But I do, even with his endless need for attention. I just handle it. April nodded. Didn't feel like joining in today? Brenda snorted. Not particularly. And while he's on vacation, I've got work to finish. I have 3 PhD proposals to review and a paper on game design to draft. April let the conversation drift for a moment, applying more lotion to continue the massage. After a pause, she asked, Ready to turn over? Brenda nodded, turning and shielding her eyes from the sun as she looked up at April, who noticed how fit Brenda was for her age, a result of regular exercise, no doubt. With a playful smile, Brenda said, And of course I was curious to see what you're capable of. April paused, her hands resting gently on Brenda's thighs as she noticed Brenda's unspoken invitation. Taking in her surroundings, April was struck by the surreal nature of the moment. Here they were, in the open air on the lower deck of a secluded, man-made island in the Pacific. There were only 3 people on the entire island, and the isolation felt almost dreamlike. Refocusing on Brenda, who lay watching her intently, April continued the massage. She traced light, careful movements along Brenda's thighs, letting the calming rhythm settle into the moment. Her hands moved in gentle, deliberate circles, steadily working out the tension. April could sense Brenda's response as she paid extra attention to the sensitive areas of the inner and outer thighs, touching lightly and subtly to help Brenda relax fully. She noticed Brenda's breathing slow as she closed her eyes, her body softening with each passing moment. Smiling inwardly at the ease in Brenda's posture, April maintained her pace, careful to respect the boundaries of relaxation. She gently continued the massage, focusing on soothing rather than stimulating, aiming to bring Brenda to a state of calm. They both remained in the quiet of the afternoon, letting the peace of the surroundings enhance the simple comfort of the moment. April noticed that Brenda was visibly relaxed and engaged, her earlier tension melting away. The 2 women shared a laugh, and April took in the moment, happy with her efforts to help Brenda unwind in the peaceful surroundings. When the massage ended, Brenda sighed deeply, looking content. That was amazing, she murmured with a satisfied smile. April stepped back with a grin. Glad I could help you feel a bit more at ease, Brenda chuckled. More than just a bit. I needed that, and you certainly delivered. She rose slowly, reaching for her sarong, then turned to April with a mischievous glint in her eye. I have an idea, Brenda said, leading April toward her room. As they walked, Brenda chatted about some of the humorous quirks she and her husband shared, showcasing a lighthearted and unexpected side to her personality. It was clear she valued open-mindedness and humor in their relationship, and April found herself smiling at Brenda's candidness. April was intrigued by Brenda's openness and unique perspective, feeling she'd gained valuable insight into Brenda's relationship. The lively conversation between them highlighted Brenda's strong personality and her trust in April, deepening the connection that had grown during their time together. After a few more laughs and stories, Brenda glanced at April and said, You know, you're something of an enigma, April. You're perceptive, you really see people, I can tell. April smiled, appreciating the observation but redirecting the conversation. She'd gathered what she needed and was ready to move on. Brenda's candidness had offered a window into her life, confirming for April that she and her husband were not hiding anything significant. April felt a sense of closure, reassured that her instincts about Brenda were on point. That would be the opposite. But still, April felt uneasy. Brenda was very observant, and April was not doing a great job of being carefree and a little less serious, which was something to keep in mind. Brenda finished adjusting the harness, looked down at April with a crooked smile, and asked, "Are you ready for this?" April smiled back. This was an experience April had not had before, a woman taking the lead. It was clear that Brenda and John probably hadn't practiced much either, because Brenda struggled to find the right angle and rhythm. She was very enthusiastic, but often it slipped out, or April had to help fix the position. At times it was uncomfortable or close to slipping away. Brenda couldn't tell how off the angle was. In the end, April managed to get there, which made Brenda visibly relieved, even though April needed to help a little. It was sweet that Brenda wanted to make April happy, even if she didn't have the means to do it perfectly. When they both finally reached a satisfying moment, they collapsed together, feeling tired and sweaty. April glanced at the clock and realized they had been engaged for over 45 minutes. Brenda noticed April looking at the time and also checked the clock. With a tired expression, she said, "Well, that was fun." April chuckled. "It sure was for me." They lay together for a few moments, cooling off. Then Brenda stood up to stretch and started to unbuckle her harness. "You probably need to shower, Tara," she said, stretching her legs after taking off the device. April understood she knew that keeping up that activity could be exhausting, especially for someone who wasn't used to it. April got off the bed and collected her clothes while glancing at Brenda. Brenda smiled and said, "I hope you don't mind if I ask you to shower in your room. I have a lot of work to do, like grading papers and reviewing a thesis proposal. I hoped to get most of it done while others were out. I clearly got a bit distracted." April laughed and replied, "Not at all. Some time alone is probably what we both need right now, after a nice shower." Brenda walked around the bed to meet April at the door, stopping her by gently holding her shoulders. April, with her hands full, let her do so. Slowly and kindly, Brenda kissed April. A gentle kiss, no open mouth, just a simple thank you. They exchanged a glance, then Brenda lowered her arms and headed to the shower. April finished getting dressed and quietly left the room. 2 hours later, April woke up in her room after a nap from the day's adventures. She felt a bit achy, so she decided to take a bath using one of the fizzy bath bombs that Jessica had given her. After her bath, she felt much better and was ready for the evening ahead, with some ideas in mind. Later that day, everyone returned, tired but cheerful. They all had a light film of water on their skin from too much time by the water. Chilly lips and faces were obvious. There was a lot of chatting about the day's events, filled with, "Did you see when I?" That always happens when friends share exciting experiences. Everyone went to shower and change, but not before Sal Giordano and Bridget Flashman asked April for a massage. She managed to help both of them before dinner was ready. And what a dinner it was! There was steak, chicken, and lobster, grilled or fried, with a white wine sauce and all the sides. Mario really outdid himself. That evening, they played a trivia game divided into teams. Couples were mixed up and put into groups of 3, and the trivia had lots of different types of questions. Martin Steele and Mario had set up a screen and projector, showing short clips from movies and then asking questions about them. Some of the scenes were a bit provocative, meant to add excitement. April persuaded Martin Steele to team her up with 2 single guys, Mark Rochgord and Sal Giordano. Again, she noticed how self-absorbed and unaware Mark really was. He looked great, but he didn't seem to have much depth. She wondered how he had won a trip like this, which was supposed to be for promising individuals. He must have some smart people supporting him. She chose to focus on the 2 single guys before moving on to Kevin Smith, wanting to deal with them quickly. She felt that Kevin Smith was the most suspicious, more than the others, and she had already ruled out 2 couples and some staff from her list of possible suspects. She chuckled to herself for thinking of it in those terms, but now it was time to look at the bigger targets. As it happened, she really didn't need to pursue anyone. Sal Giordano was joking around the moment she sat down, and it was pretty funny. Mark Rochgord, on the other hand, just bragged about how amazing he was and why he was such a great catch. Halfway through, April realized he genuinely believed what he was saying, and it wasn't just a show to impress women. One thing he said was, "Every woman has a different reaction, you know. All the women have shown something different when they reach a certain point." When he said this, he looked straight at April for a moment, then looked away. She quickly glanced at Sal and pretended to be sick by touching her throat. Another comment was, "It takes skill to really please a woman. I've practiced a lot, and if I may say so, I think I'm pretty good." Then he winked at April. When he excused himself to go to the bathroom, she rolled her eyes at Sal, who just smiled back. "Yeah, he's a bit full of himself, I know, but he can back it up," Sal said casually while sipping his drink. April raised an eyebrow. "And you'd know how?" Sal smiled. "We have a past. It was interesting." This was the chance April had been waiting for. It was easy to pretend to be interested, even though actually being with Mark would be a tough sell. She was skilled herself and doubted he could match up. But it was worth a try to learn more about him. She suspected that someone like him wouldn't be a mastermind behind the bank robberies, but might be a clever scam artist. Sometimes getting closer to someone reveals a lot about who they are. Sal, on the other hand, seemed like a real suspect. He was a bit too charming, a bit too careful, and a bit too relaxed. Almost too good to be true. At one point, she asked him between rounds, "So, no one at home for you?" Sal looked away and said to the screen, "No, there used to be, but we had different ideas about relationships." April was curious and asked, "Can I ask what happened?" Sal looked back with a slight frown, stared for a moment, and then explained, "We had what you might call an open relationship. We agreed it would be casual when we started, and she was honest about it. I could explore, too. I did a couple of times, but then I found out she was getting involved with my friends. There's a difference between sharing and overdoing it. It wasn't for me. We ended things, and since then I haven't really been interested in anything serious." He looked away and finished his drink. April thought about what he said. April decided to keep things light. "Let's just enjoy the evening," she said with a friendly smile, though her mind remained on alert. Throughout the night, she noticed several guests were a bit too enthusiastic with their drinks, especially Paula Woods, who seemed intent on going overboard. After Paula's fifth Manhattan, April started subtly watering down her drinks to keep the atmosphere under control. As the night progressed, April noticed Sal and Mark exchanging quiet glances in her direction, often whispering and gesturing. She smiled back warmly, aware they were working up the nerve to approach her directly. They were later joined by a few others, including Flashman and the Patels, adding to the lively energy in the room. Yet Sal and Mark continued their silent exchange, each nudging the other to take the lead. Eventually, April decided to cut through the suspense. She stood up cheerfully and announced, "Well, I'm off to bed. Anyone want to join me?" Sal nearly knocked over his chair in his hurry to respond, with Mark close behind. They followed her to her room, where April, ever the straightforward one, got right to the point. She made it clear she expected them to keep things simple and playful. The two men exchanged quick, eager looks, and they joined her in relaxed conversation, sharing a light-hearted end to an otherwise eventful evening. April appreciated Sal's patient approach, taking his time and showing a gentle touch, which set a comfortable tone. Meanwhile, Mark was less about subtlety, focusing on what he thought would please her. April observed the way they worked together, each keeping their interactions smooth and respectful, sharing the moment rather than competing for her attention. As they continued, April felt a calm sense of control. She recognized that managing the dynamics of two partners required some experience, particularly ensuring everyone felt included. She was used to guiding interactions to make them flow, having learned over time how to keep things balanced without anyone feeling overlooked. Mark, eager to continue, took the lead with straightforward energy, his approach direct and uncomplicated. While his style was far from refined, his enthusiasm matched the setting, making April smile at the simplicity of it. When Sal took over, his approach was more thoughtful, bringing a steady rhythm that felt much more intentional. In the end, April let herself relax, appreciating the difference in both men's approaches and finding enjoyment in their distinct personalities. The evening had been unexpectedly lively, and as it wound down, she felt pleased with how natural and light-hearted it had been. He took his time, adjusting his movements as he watched how April reacted. While Mark was strong and big, Sal focused on skill. April experienced pleasure a few more times, 4 in total, which was a near record for her. After they switched places and tried different ways for about 20 more minutes, she was ready for a big finish. She felt unsure, but the excitement took over, and she wanted to try something new, though she preferred Sal's approach over Mark's. She didn't want to feel awkward the next day. In the end, she enjoyed herself one last time, and both men finished at almost the same moment. Everyone felt tired and a bit sore, covered in sweat by the time it was all done. The bed was cramped, and April playfully nudged Sal and Mark off the bed and pointed to the door, smiling sleepily at them. Mark seemed like he wanted to say something but held back. Sal smiled and quietly said, "Best time ever." April was asleep by the time the door closed. The next day was filled with laughter. Breakfast was relaxed and late, with everyone enjoying breakfast bagels stuffed with fried eggs and bacon. Some chose fruit, and there was a clear divide by gender. Surprisingly, no one asked for beer with their breakfast. After seeing some of the men drink heavily the night before, April was relieved. 2 husbands did ask her for a light Bloody Mary, but she went easy on the vodka. The way she prepared them, they were more like a meal than a drink anyway. Most people seemed to have adjusted well to life on the island. They understood the rhythm of things and how to participate. Brenda Roker was still a bit distant even toward April, despite their time together the day before, but everyone else appeared relaxed and eager to have fun. Even Mike and Paula Woods seemed to have made up after their earlier issues. April observed the small exchanges and gestures that come with a happy marriage. Whatever they had experienced the night before brought them closer together. She wondered if they had a relationship where everything was perfect when things went well, but when they didn't, it led to arguments. She shook off the thought and made the requested espresso. She wouldn't know for sure without a deep conversation, and that seemed unlikely to happen. The day went on, with Martin Steele pairing people into small groups of 2, intentionally separating couples to lead a fun improv comedy lesson on the sun deck. He worked with the group, helping them understand what they needed to do, and then lunch was served. April, watching from the side, was impressed with Steele. He really knew how to teach them to let loose and took charge of everything. If he were interested in women, she might have thought about getting to know him better. He even spotted her watching and winked, then pulled her into the middle of a fun scene he was creating. April wasn't excited about it, but gave it her best shot. To her surprise, she had a good time laughing along with everyone at the silly situations Steele came up with. In her scene, she played a shoe seller trying to charm a customer while his wife stood nearby, unaware of her intentions. She recalled some of the exercises from her training as a field agent and smiled to herself. All of the ideas Steele suggested had playful undertones that everyone noticed. When lunch came, with sushi and teriyaki bowls for those who preferred something else, drinks also appeared. As the afternoon went on, the scenes got funnier, and with the drinks flowing, light flirting became more common. By evening, it felt like a playful version of Spin the Bottle. April stayed busy pouring pitchers of margaritas and taking part in some of the scenes. She noticed that Astrid and Sam joined in nearly every scene and were surprisingly good at acting. They were clearly comfortable in front of a crowd, which made April think they had some performance experience. When evening came, everyone was in high spirits. The drinks were plentiful, conversations flowed, and connections were made. April had to admit Steele did an amazing job of bringing together people who didn't know each other and helping them relax and enjoy themselves. For a moment, she wondered if he could make a good field agent. He certainly had the right skills. She planned to speak to Dermot about him when she returned, but back to what she needed to focus on. While the day had been enjoyable, it was time to think about Kevin Smith. She had been subtly flirting with him all day, giving him inviting looks and showing her interest. And he definitely seemed interested in her, smiling broadly whenever their eyes met. As dinner time approached, April was asked to give 3 massages, one for Mark Rothschild, one for Bridget Flashman, and one for Martin Steele. He smiled at April as he asked, "Do you mind, Tara? These events always leave my back a bit tense." Being on all day can really tire you out. After finishing her tasks, Tara finally sat down to eat when, unexpectedly, Kevin Smith joined her. "And how are you tonight, Tara?" he asked. taking a seat and placing a plate of grilled chicken wrapped in bacon with BBQ sauce and melted cheese in front of him. Tara smiled and fiddled with her salad. "I'm fine, thank you," she replied in a soft voice. She thought he would respond better if she seemed more gentle rather than assertive, though she was prepared to change her approach if needed. But that didn't end up being necessary. "How are you liking the island?" he asked, clearly searching for something to discuss. "It's lovely, much better than home." She sighed, giving him a chance to ask about her family. "I imagine it's nicer than most places." He looked out at the sunset reflecting on the water. He was quite smooth, and Tara acknowledged his skills for a moment. He was good, maybe too good, which made her cautious. "So, where are you from, Tara?" Tara shared her story, a college student facing tough times and doing what she could to get by. He nodded and looked into her eyes at the right moments, trying to connect with her. During the conversation, she glanced around to stay aware of her surroundings. In her situation, being alert was essential for future planning. Others were pairing up or forming small groups. She noticed that no one from the original couples was still together, which was quite intriguing, but Tara pushed her thoughts back to the conversation. She knew she needed to get to know this man better to learn how he was involved in the bank robberies, and that required careful planning to get him alone. "So, Tara, you've seen what's happening here, right? I'm guessing you're familiar with this kind of situation?" he asked, following her gaze toward the other guests. Tara quickly considered her response. She had several options. She could pretend to be offended, flirt back, play it cool, or even suggest going somewhere private. Many choices crossed her mind. In the end, she settled on a simple answer. "I've noticed, yes." He leaned in closer. "And what do you think about it?" It was clear he was hinting at something deeper. Carefully putting the situation in her hands, he waited to see how she would respond. "Once you start, you have to go all the way," she thought. "Usually on my hands and knees," she replied, taking a bold approach. She knew Kevin was taking a drink, and she enjoyed seeing his surprise. He coughed lightly, set his drink down, and looked at her with a new expression. She met his gaze, smiling mysteriously, not revealing anything more. "I see," he said after a moment of obvious thought. "Actually, that's something I'd like to see." His question sounded more like a statement. April thought it wasn't the best line, but it was enough. "My room?" He returned her smile, lighting up his whole face. It was unfortunate that he had a bad reputation, she thought. He was charming. They both stood up and walked to the circular stairs, heading down to her room. As soon as they were out of sight, Kevin unexpectedly pulled her close and kissed her firmly. It caught her off guard, but she found herself responding. It was an intense kiss, filled with eagerness, and she pulled away after a moment to catch her breath. He smiled at her and said, "I'll remember that." April wasn't sure what he meant, but it didn't matter much to her now. 2 minutes later, they were in her room. She locked the door after he entered, making a show of it, and then he flopped onto her bed, watching her intently. "I have something to take care of," she said, playfully licking her lips at him. She moved to her drawers, blocking his view with her body. She opened one drawer and took out the taser she had prepared, ready for this moment. In one swift motion, she turned and aimed it at him. The two metal tips shot out and hit him square in the stomach. For a brief moment, she worried about where it struck because she didn't want to deal with any mess. Thankfully, he remained composed, going stiff and making a noise as he lost control over his muscles. She gave him one jolt and then pressed the button to retract the metal tips. The taser would need some time to recharge, and she knew the effects wouldn't last long. Quickly, she pulled him onto the bed and secured his arms and legs using plastic ties she had prepared earlier. She had cleverly hidden those with scarves tied to the legs of the bed, since the ties alone wouldn't reach. She kept an eye on Smith as he slowly started to wake up. Once he was aware, she sat at the foot of the bed holding the taser and watched him come around. When she thought he could understand, she raised a pack of socks and the taser. "All right, Mr. Smith, or whatever your real name is, we need to talk. I'll do the talking and you will listen. First, if you make any noise, you'll get another shock from this." She noticed his eyes widen slightly as he glanced at the taser. He clearly didn't want that. "And then I'll put these socks in your mouth. I've worn them so they're not going to taste nice," she said, pointing to the pack. "What do you want?" he asked weakly. "We'll get to that. First, I want you to understand where you are right now. Everyone else is distracted and won't hear you. If you scream or make a sound, they'll just think we're arguing. I could shock you again and get rid of you without anyone noticing. So the choice is yours. Answer my questions honestly or face the consequences." She made that last part sound serious, even though it wasn't entirely true. She kept her expression cold and unreadable. Smith's eyes shifted between the taser and hers. She saw he was testing the ties around his hands and feet, hoping she wouldn't notice. "What have I done to you? I was just trying to have a good time," he added, trying to regain some confidence. April smiled, trying to stay emotionless. "Yes, well, you seemed eager, but let's talk about something more serious. Bank robberies." He looked puzzled for a moment. "Talk about what?" he asked, sounding both scared and confused. April started to doubt herself for a moment. "Bank robberies. Don't give me that look. We both know that's why you're here. I need details, and you are going to provide them to me. Or else—" She sparked the taser again and gave him her cold smile. He swallowed hard. "I honestly don't know what you're talking about," he said, with a bit more confidence this time. April studied him. Everything about his body language suggested he truly didn't know. He kept looking at the taser and her, a mix of fear and desperation in his eyes. "Kevin, I don't believe that's your real name, so how about we start there?" She stood up, and his eyes grew wide as he began to babble. "I'm Tom Smith. Really? Kevin is my brother?" There was a brief silence as April took this in. "I'm a con artist, okay? A scammer, that's the truth." April was taken aback by his response. "You're a what?" "I'm the odd one in my family, okay? Kevin is my brother. He owes me. I helped him out of a tough spot a while back. He won this trip and I thought I could join him. Free sun and drinks sounded good. He figured it was a way to help me. No one would know who he really was. So here I am." "Where's your brother now?" "At home. He's staying there until I get back. That was the agreement." April opened her mouth, then closed it again. This was unexpected. She made a quick decision. "Well, Tom, let's see if you're being honest." She turned away and searched her bag for her large phone. Dialing, she waited. "International exports. How can I direct your call?" a voice said when the call connected. "I'd like to speak to Mr. Bond's manager, please." She was soon connected to the office of Ingram's and Associates. Someone had decided to use International Exports as a cover, the same company that James Bond was said to work for. April could only picture Jessica's reaction if she knew this was being used for call verification. A moment later, a voice came on the line. "Hello, April." "Megan, how are you? I didn't know you'd be working." "I just got back. I needed a break, so I volunteered. I'm caught up on your adventure. Honestly, April, you always get the exciting ones. How's the sun?" "Not as tanned as I'd like. I'm so glad to hear from you. I missed you." "Yeah, my last trip. Well, it wasn't great. It took a toll on me." There was a pause. April knew what that meant. She knew they would need a girls' night out soon. "I understand. I want to hear about it, but now is not the right time." "Right. So, what do you need, April?" "I need someone to check on something. Do we have anyone in Portland? I need to verify something quickly. I have someone here who might not be truthful about his story." "This the Kevin Smith case you mentioned? We have a contractor ready in Portland since you first talked about it. They can handle it right away." "Okay, so this guy claims to be Kevin's brother, Tom. He says he's here instead of him. He claims his brother is hiding at home. We know where that is. I need someone to find out if he's there and what's going on. Can we do that?" "Sure, I'll handle it. It might take a few hours. Are you going to be okay?" "The sooner, the better. It's about 11 here, and I can't keep him here past about 4 or 5. If I wait longer, I might have to start explaining things I want to avoid." April glared at the man on her bed as she spoke. "Oh, we should be done way before then." "Great. I'll be waiting. Let me know when you have updates." "Will do, April." "Don't do anything I wouldn't do." Then the connection ended, and April chuckled softly. Megan was more daring than many people, even April herself. She often put herself into situations that April would never consider. April glanced at the tied-up man who watched her with distrust. He had misunderstood her laughter, not realizing it was about the conversation she had with Megan. She didn't feel the need to explain, so she just smiled calmly and said, "Well, let's see if you are being honest. We might have to wait a little, but I have someone checking on your story. Soon we'll know if Kevin agrees with you." As she observed him closely, she noticed Tom wasn't panicking. Instead, he seemed to relax a bit and gave her a small, cautious smile. "Good. You'll see I am telling the truth." Now, April felt certain he was being honest. When she challenged him about his story, instead of getting nervous or trying to negotiate, he simply calmed down. She was confident it would turn out to be true. That posed a problem. She had tied him up and had given him a scare, but he wasn't the person she was after. This was troublesome. Still, she wasn't going to let him go until she heard from Megan. Keeping up her act was important, and it would help her maintain control until she could release him. She wanted him to feel uneasy. Regardless of her feelings, there was no way she would apologize to him. Doing that would give him the impression he had an advantage over her, and she needed him to stay quiet. It was much better for him to be afraid of her than for her to owe him anything. She stood up, took out her tablet, and popped in her earbuds to listen to the recordings while she waited. Unfortunately, there wasn't much related to her task, but she did learn some interesting things about the couples and how they viewed her, with Tara being one of the terms the software picked up. It seemed she had caught the attention of some couples. Only Brenda seemed cautious, but it looked like Brenda was wary of everyone. April glanced up a few times as Tom attempted to start a conversation, but she just gave him a brief, unreadable smile and went back to listening. After almost 2 hours, he asked to go to the bathroom, and she could tell he was serious about it. She debated with herself for a moment, but in the end, she decided to cut the plastic ties from his arms and legs with a pair of scissors. She didn't say anything while doing this, and he remained quiet as well. He sat still for a moment, rubbing his wrists and ankles, then got up and walked silently to the bathroom. April moved her chair in front of the door and sat down, holding her taser and satellite phone in her lap. When Tom came out of the bathroom, he paused and looked at her. She pointed to the bed and said kindly, "I hope you washed your hands?" He narrowed his eyes, and she noticed the thoughts swirling in his mind, so she adjusted the position of the taser in her lap just enough for him to notice. He hesitantly sat on the edge of the bed. They spent 10 minutes just looking at each other until he finally spoke. "You can't keep me here forever, you know." "I know," she replied firmly, "but I probably won't have to. My friends are checking your story, and once I hear back, if it matches what you said, you can leave." He rubbed his wrists. "And I'm just supposed to stay quiet?" "Oh, you'll be quiet, trust me. Just think about this. You're not who you say you are, and you're here under false claims. Imagine what Martin Steele would do if he found that out. I'm investigating a bank robbery, and you're getting in the way. At worst, you could be messing up my investigation." She knew he could see through her words, but she hoped he wouldn't dig too deep. "Oh, come on. What authority do you think you have here? Kevin, Tom, whatever your name is, you really want to know who I work for?" His eyes widened. "Let's just say it has initials and a long reach. If you want to test that, go ahead, scream about it and see what happens. I promise it won't be fun for you." There was another silence. She hoped he believed her bluff. The longer they sat in silence, the more time he had to think, and the more he thought, the more he could challenge her story. She didn't need to worry. 15 minutes later, the phone rang. She picked up right away, keeping her gaze on Kevin Tom, who was watching her intently. "Hey, girl," Megan said without waiting for April to respond. "It checks out. Our people in Portland found his brother hanging around. It took a bit, but after they made some noise, he talked. Turns out they are off-duty cops, so it's not too far from the truth. From what they learned, it's the same story you got. Either this is a well-prepared setup or it's for real." "Thanks, Megan. How reliable do you think this is?" "I believe it's genuine. We've used these guys before, and they know what they're doing. They mentioned he seemed really afraid of being arrested for something, even though there's nothing to charge him with. They feel this is solid." "Yeah, I think so too. It might still be a trick, but I think you're right. I believe Mr. Tom just wants to enjoy the sun. Should we inform the client about this?" "That's the big question. I'm not sure. What do you think, Megan? Does the client have a right to know that one of his branch managers is being dishonest?" She asked this for Tom to hear. He looked at her, pleading without words. "Please, no." She covered the phone's mouthpiece. "What do you think, Tom? Should he find out?" She knew she was using this situation against him, but she didn't mind at all. Please, he might fire Kevin. Kevin is the only one in the family who matters. Blame me instead. April thought for a moment, pretending to consider her options. There wasn't really a choice, but Tom was confused. She took her hand off the mouthpiece. Against my better judgment, let's keep this quiet for now, Megan. If Tom says anything, then we tell his brother, all right? Megan stayed quiet. She was smart and realized April's plan. I won't say a thing. You can trust me. Tom sounded desperate. The word of someone who tricks others? That's not worth much. April regretted saying that because it made her seem tougher than she wanted. I promise I won't say anything. She looked at him intently for a moment before speaking into the phone. Okay, Megan. Thanks for checking on that for me. I'll contact you soon. No problem, April. Sorry about this. I know it would have been good to settle. Well, I'll keep looking. Thanks again, Megan. Talk to you later. With that, the call and the evening ended. Silently, she got up, moved the chair, and pointed to the door. You can go now. Remember, not a word. I still need to find the people blocking the banks. Tom lingered by the door, hopefully saying, Maybe I can help? No, thank you. You'd just get in the way. Just go have some fun and don't bother me, okay? He nodded, unlocked and opened the door, hesitating for a moment as if he wanted to speak, then left, closing the door behind him. April sank onto the bed. She looked at the clock and saw it was a little after 3 in the morning. Darn, she whispered, then remembered to keep quiet. Walls could hear. In her case, they truly could. The next day went by in a blur. She was tired from staying up late and missed breakfast. Martin Steele looked at her closely when she arrived at 9:45 but said nothing. She sensed he would talk to her later. Tom Smith carefully avoided her, not even glancing her way. Fortunately, it was another day when most of the vacationers were off the island. There was a fishing contest, and they were gone for most of the day, giving April a chance to regain her energy. She enjoyed some time swimming, relaxing in the hot tub, and even had a nap. It was a slow day. One thing she appreciated was that the night before had been quiet for her, giving her a nice break. After breakfast, they received inexpensive digital cameras. Each couple, along with the 3 single men paired with Astrid, Sam, and April, received a task. They were told to take the most interesting picture. They could explore the island, use the zodiacs and jet skis, and had until 5 p.m. to return with their photos. That evening, they would have a fun gathering to view all the submitted pictures. Each couple could choose 5 photos to enter into a friendly contest that everyone would judge. It was a smart idea, but once the announcement was made, everyone sat in silence, unsure of what to do next. Some began brainstorming excitedly, while others seemed confused. Fortunately, Martin had been thoughtful and gave each couple a basic tablet with ideas for photos already loaded on it. After a quick session on how to use the cameras, everyone was reminded to be back by 5 p.m. April was paired with Sal Giordano. As he sat across from her, she realized she didn't want to be anyone's model, so she quickly suggested a different plan. So, Tara, should we check out your clothes? Sal asked, with a relaxed smile, looking at the camera. Actually, Sal, I think we should check out yours, she replied. Let's do something unique. Everyone else will focus on the women, so we can do a fun photo series featuring you. Sal stared at her for a moment before laughing. 10 out of 10 for creativity, Tara. I doubt anyone will care to see pictures of me, but why not? I'm in. So, that's what they decided to do. After looking through his clothes, they packed a bag with outfits, snacks, and drinks, and set off on one of the jet skis to the shore. This was the first time April had left the island since she arrived. For almost 4 hours, they took photos of Sal picking up rocks and driftwood, trying to recreate a famous image of a male model carrying 2 tires. Surprisingly, they had no trouble capturing the essence of the moment. While they were busy with their project, they noticed Bridget and Brad Flashman in the lagoon nearby. They were trying their best to take some fun pictures of Bridget, but it was clear she wasn't happy about it. As they paused for a drink, April and Sal heard Brad asking Bridget if she could at least let him take a few photos. From where they stood, it was obvious Bridget was feeling upset. She was worried about her body and didn't understand how anyone could think she looked good. It was one thing to pretend to be confident in front of others, but when it came to taking pretty pictures, She questioned who would even want to see those. April turned to Sal with a serious look. "Can you just wait a moment? I need to go talk to them." Sal smiled at her and replied, "Of course. I totally understand. Do you want help?" April thought for a moment, then said, "Thanks, Sal. That means a lot. But I think I should handle this on my own." He nodded and she got up, brushing off her clothes as she did. Brad and Bridget were just over a dune, clearly not aware of April and Sal nearby. Bridget looked surprised and a bit embarrassed when she saw April approach, waving to them. "Hey, everyone!" April called cheerfully. Bridget sighed and sat down, wrapping a shawl around her. Brad stood there watching April come closer, his face showing he was worried about how things could get worse. April reached them and settled onto the sand beside Bridget. It felt tense. "Hey, I heard you were taking some pictures back there." Before she could finish, Bridget turned to her and said, "This is awful. I really hate this." Then she broke down, tears spilling over. April was taken by surprise but knew she needed to help. This was her chance to assist, and she was ready to step in. She glanced at Brad, who was kneeling with the camera forgotten in the sand, looking at Bridget with concern and confusion. He seemed to want to help, but didn't know how. "So I guess these pictures make you feel uncomfortable. You don't think you look good enough for them, right?" April asked gently. Being direct could be risky. If she was wrong, it might upset them. But they weren't going to see each other again, and time was short, so she decided to be bold. Bridget nodded slowly, a tear rolling down her cheek. Brad moved closer, kneeling beside Bridget and taking her hands in his. "That's not true. You are beautiful. To me, you are amazing." He shot a frustrated look at April. "Don't listen to her, Bridget. She doesn't know what she's talking about." He misunderstood her intentions, but that was okay. He wasn't the person she needed to support her. "Actually, Bridget, I kind of agree with your husband," she said plainly. Bridget looked at her confused, and Brad gave her a questioning glance too. "Look, I understand this must be tough, right? Society says we all need to be a certain height and weight with perfect figures, right? That's what all the ads show us, right? I bet you don't feel like you fit that image, do you?" No one answered, so April took a moment and continued. "Well, here's the reality, Bridget. Neither can I. Neither can your mom, my sister, or anyone I know. No one can, except for the models, and they spend hours getting ready for their photo shoots. It's all nonsense. Being attractive isn't just about looks. It's about how someone feels and how you see those feelings. Brad!" He jumped a little when she turned to him and asked, "What do you find most attractive about your wife? Quick, tell me." Without pausing, he replied, It's not just one thing. Her eyes. I love how they crinkle when she's about to tell a joke. Her laugh. The way she scratches her nose when she's thinking. The smile she gives me when I walk in, when she's with friends." He started to get more into it, looking back at Bridget as he spoke. "The way she puts a finger to my lips when she wants me to be quiet. Her kindness. Did you know she volunteers for Habitat for Humanity? Just everything." Leaning in, April casually picked up the camera. "I can see it. You both really care about each other." She turned the camera on and tried to view some pictures on the screen. There were images of Bridget in the water, trying to throw her hair back. The settings on the camera had been off, making the photos look different than intended. "Okay, so you've been trying to take some nice pictures, right? And you don't feel comfortable with it, right, Bridget?" "Well, I just don't look like that. I've tried, but the weight just doesn't change, you know," Bridget replied, sniffling. "Yeah," April agreed. "I know how that feels." Then she had an idea. "Bridget, what do you do to connect with Brad? Show me what you do." Bridget looked around, a bit nervous. "What? Here? Why not? It's just us here," April encouraged, a little embarrassed by her own words. A shy smile appeared on Bridget's face as she considered April's suggestion. "Okay," she said slowly. She turned to Brad and gave him a warm, playful smile. "Hey, big guy. Want to have some fun?" She finished with a teasing gesture. That was what April had been waiting for. The camera was ready, and she kept taking picture after picture. Bridget leaned in closer to Brad, locking eyes with him. "I think he cares," she said. "You know he does," Brad replied with a playful laugh. More photos were taken. "I love you, you big goof." "I love you too," Brad said, smiling. April chuckled. Okay, you two, tone it down a bit, or I might need a break. Bridget shot a look at April that hinted she was slightly let down. All right, check these out, April said, showing the photos she had just taken. All three huddled around the camera, trying to block the sun to see the images better. The shots were well framed, capturing the two of them reaching for each other. Bridget's face was perfectly lit, the sunlight highlighting her expression. See, that's what I'm talking about. That look? That's real connection. Forget the fancy poses and stage shots. It's all about the feelings in that moment. Bridget, you really know how to make him feel special. Many don't know how to connect like that. You've got something great, Bridget. I admire that. Bridget glanced at her, a little unsure. Admire me? I don't believe that, Tara. Look at you. You are the all-American girl. Anyone would be lucky to have you. April smiled back. Believe it or not, Bridget, with what I do, finding a good partner who understands everything is harder than it seems. I could easily go out any night, but finding someone for a real relationship? That's tricky. Not a single word was untrue, and April thought about Raph as she said it. Bridget and Brad didn't know her true job, but being a bartender and a personal masseuse to many eager tourists wasn't likely the best career for someone hoping to settle down. Look, she said, giving the camera back to Brad. I have to return to my photographer. I think he's finished with his break. Take more pictures. Ask her to charm you. And then, Bridget, you do the same. Use the camera to capture those special moments. If you feel shy, take photos near the water or behind a tree, whatever makes you comfortable. But remember, it's all about the look in your eyes. Now, I have to go. Just as she stood up, Bridget asked, Who are you, Tara? You seem like more than just a bartender. April looked down at them, sitting in the warm sand. Didn't you know? All bartenders have a degree in amateur psychology. It's part of the job. See you later? She said it lightly and walked away without looking back. She climbed over the dune and found Sal lying on the sand taking a nap. He lifted his head when he heard her coming and said softly, That was really something, Tara. You have a gift for that sort of thing. April simply shrugged, not wanting to continue that topic. All right, where were we? Later that day, Brad and Bridget's photos came in second in the poll that Martin Steele organized. April's pictures came in third, losing to Brenda Rokes's stunning photos taken on the island, featuring her in a light dress. The pictures were beautiful, taken with the sun shining behind her. Despite that, Brad and Bridget were pleased with their photos. The best one showed Bridget in the water, reaching out to Brad, who was holding the camera. Astrid's photos, on the other hand, were quite shocking for their content. Before dinner, which was an Italian feast, April escaped to her cabin for half an hour. She pondered how Mario would prepare all that food without too much garlic, since strong garlic breath would definitely spoil a romantic evening. No one enjoys being around someone with garlic breath all night. April also made her daily call to Egram's and quickly looked over the day's recordings, but there wasn't much to see since everyone had been out all day. Nothing useful was there. Returning to the main deck, April felt content. She was reasonably sure that Brad and Bridget were genuine. It was possible they were better at hiding things than she wanted to believe, but she doubted it. This thought worried her since she was running low on candidates for gathering information about the bank robbery. That evening, she gathered more proof that Brad and Bridget were honest. April was at the bar, taking a moment for herself after a busy order of margaritas, when Bridget came over. Tara, do you have a moment? Of course, Bridget. Great job earlier, by the way. I knew you could do it. Remember, being attractive is about how you feel, not just how you look. Yes, that's true. Although it helps if you look good, I have to admit. Well, yes. But being on a strict diet isn't my favorite thing. Bridget giggled for a moment, then looked nervous, as if she was building up to ask something. So, about this island getaway, we've noticed a lot of people doing things, you know? There wasn't really a question, so April just nodded. Well, it's not really our thing, to be honest, but we've talked it over and this might be our only chance. You were so nice this afternoon and we were wondering. Bridget didn't actually ask anything and just looked at April, uncertain. There was a brief silence, and April decided to see how hard she would make Bridget work. Wondering what? April prompted. Bridget met her gaze, looking a bit anxious. Then she took a deep breath and said, If you're interested in joining us for some fun, especially with Brad, he's really nice. April couldn't help but look over at Brad, who was sitting at the table with Tom Smith. He smiled at her and raised his glass. She chuckled to herself, realizing he sent his wife to invite her. It made sense. Asking someone for this kind of thing could be tricky for a couple. She thought for a moment, pursing her lips. Bridget? Sure, why not? It's just for fun. Are you really okay with this? I don't want to create any awkwardness. Bridget smiled and nodded toward the table. No worries. If he has some fun, I want some too, she whispered. April looked back at the table and suddenly realized Bridget was talking about Tom. That could be a little complicated, but there was no turning back now. Let's grab a drink and have a good time, said April, quoting a line from her favorite escape movie. And that's what they did. April joined them at the table, and for the next 30 minutes they talked, drank, and even sang some songs. She tried to include Tom, making sure to give him a few encouraging looks. He blinked back at her, showing he understood. She learned that Brad and Bridget had met while she was working at a coffee shop. She often got his order wrong, and he eventually told her she owed him dinner for it. That dinner led to them getting married, with 2 kids at home and their grandparents babysitting while they were on vacation. Then, kindly, Brad suggested, "Shall we move elsewhere?" Bridget looked at Tom, then at Brad, and asked, "How does this usually work? Do we all go together? What are the usual steps?" April laughed and said, "I don't think there are any strict rules, Bridget. Do you want to do this together or keep some things to yourselves?" Bridget leaned over, kissed Brad on the cheek, and looked him in the eyes. "Are you really okay with this? Last chance? We can still change our minds." Brad smiled back, nodded, and said, "Be happy. Come back to me when you're done, and try not to have too much fun, okay?" Bridget patted his hand and replied, "Never. You mean everything to me. I love you even more for letting me do this." She turned back to April and said, "Please make him happy, okay?" But not too happy. Then Tom and April got up and left without looking back. The table fell silent for a moment, and then April asked, "Shall we?" The rest of the evening went by in a blur. They arrived at Brad and Bridget's room. Bridget was nowhere in sight, and April wasn't sure what to expect. As soon as she entered the room, she looked at Brad. He leaned in without any small talk or warming up and went straight for a kiss. At first, it felt a bit awkward, but she quickly started to feel more comfortable. Time seemed to disappear as they continued kissing. It turned out that Brad was quite skilled at it. Gradually, his hands moved around her, making her feel excited. A quick touch here and there, a finger, a small squeeze, everything was brief, yet intense. Later, April would think of it as a great lesson in attraction. What Brad was doing surprised her, and she felt swept away by it. About 20 minutes later, April felt more ready than ever. Brad had helped her out of her clothes, gently keeping her from returning the favor, guiding her hands away when she tried. She felt a rush of excitement, and he hadn't said a word the entire time. He was different now than the Brad she had seen earlier that day. He was confident and knew exactly what he was doing. An hour later, April felt exhilarated, her heart racing, and her body buzzing from the wave of sensations she had experienced. She had reached several peaks of pleasure, and she wasn't sure she could handle more. What surprised her was that Brad had yet to reach his own climax, and he wouldn't let her touch him in return. After the first wave of pleasure, she attempted to reciprocate, but he gently pushed her back down and said the only words he had spoken since they entered the room. "No, tonight is all about you." And that was that. He began kissing her from head to toe, exploring her body in ways she hadn't experienced before, which stirred something new within her. He paid attention to every detail, taking his time and savoring the moment. Brad had shown a surprising level of patience, carefully pacing his movements and allowing April to relax fully. He was attentive, taking his time and focusing on subtle gestures, and April felt a calm ease as they shared a quiet and comfortable connection. Throughout the evening, Brad was thorough and surprisingly thoughtful, leading the experience with steady assurance. April noted his calm demeanor, which held a sense of discipline she hadn't encountered often, leaving her feeling both relaxed and quietly appreciative of his approach. She noticed he was present but somewhat reserved, as if maintaining a respectful distance emotionally, making it clear that his commitment to his wife was steadfast. The night left April feeling fulfilled yet slightly detached, understanding that Brad's attentiveness wasn't a sign of deeper involvement but rather a practiced approach. She admired his dedication and commitment to his wife, even as he maintained boundaries, leaving her with a newfound respect for his character. At the end, he explained his personal boundary regarding intimacy, speaking softly but sincerely, which April found unexpectedly thoughtful. She gave him a warm smile, appreciating his honesty. Afterward, Brad excused himself briefly to retrieve a towel for her, and she couldn't help but smile at his considerate nature. Dressing quietly, April took a moment to give Brad a friendly, reassuring smile. She leaned down and gave him a gentle kiss on the lips. "You've certainly got a lot of skill, Mr. Flashman," she said, her tone playful but genuine. "Thanks for the evening. Now I think it's time for me to get some rest." Brad returned her smile, and the two exchanged a respectful nod before April left, grateful for the quiet understanding they'd shared. "See you later, sir," she said before leaving the room. She went to her own space and collapsed onto her bed, completely exhausted. The next evening brought significant news, or more accurately, the next morning. April woke up a bit earlier than usual, remembering how in previous days she had to rush to review recordings from the night before. She had a lot to go through, and she needed to start now. Dressed in her robe, she made coffee and plugged in her earphones to listen to what the tablet had recorded, hoping no one would interrupt her curiosity. She had a movie ready to play on the app if someone asked what she was doing. After about 20 minutes of listening, she sipped her coffee and watched a couple of people from last night's gathering struggle into the sunshine, drinking their coffee quietly. No one was chatting much except for Brenda and John Roker, who were speaking softly. Their body language suggested something significant was going to happen later. When she reached a recorded conversation in Astrid's room, things started to make sense. "So, what's the plan?" one voice asked. "I've got pictures from 3 of our events." "That might be enough unless you want a 4th, came the response. "No, maybe. 3 is okay, but 4 would be better. Who should we focus on?" "How about Brenda and her husband? She's a bit disagreeable. It would be fun to put her in her place." "Sam, try not to be mean. But yeah, I understand your point. All right, we'll target them tonight. Is the camera still up?" "Of course. Why would I take it down?" "Because, dear Sam, I wouldn't be surprised if you just wanted to enjoy the pictures." "I would never do such a thing." Thwunk. "That should teach you." April guessed the last noise was a pillow being playfully tossed, noted by the light-hearted tone of the conversation. Then came one more line that caught her attention. "We need to make sure we can cover the bar duty on the last day. We need to get that Tara girl out so we can do our thing." It was a vague comment, and April wasn't sure what it meant, but it was clear there was some sneaky recording happening. She knew she needed to investigate further. April debated whether to involve Smith for backup or handle it herself. In the end, she thought it would be smart to keep him as a backup once she gathered more information. The day passed slowly. They had breakfast late, and in the afternoon, Martin took the couples to the beach using Zodiac boats and organized a scavenger hunt to find specific items among the greenery. Some plants were set up earlier, while others grew naturally. While they were away, April decided to enjoy the hot tub. She added another bath bomb her boss had given her, knowing she might get some teasing later. She also took the chance to make a phone call and check in. As she mixed the salts in the water, she saw Astrid and Sam watching and giggling. They were already drinking something colorful. April made a mental note to check the bar later since she hadn't made those drinks. She caught their eye, and they lifted their glasses to her. Sam got up and came over, asking, "What are you doing, Tara?" April paused, feeling a bit shy, and replied, "Just something to help with my soreness." She didn't look directly at them when saying that. "Oh," Sam said, glancing at Astrid before adding, "Could we borrow some of that? I totally get it. We've been taking Tylenol instead." April thought for a moment and said, "Sure. I'll share some later after I'm done here. Sound good?" Sam smiled and replied, "Cool, thanks," then skipped back to her seat with Astrid. April felt sore from a busy week, and the hot tub was helping ease her discomfort. After about half an hour, she reluctantly stood up to avoid wrinkly skin and headed back to her room. Astrid and Sam were still sitting together, quietly chatting and glancing at her. She was surprised they hadn't joined her in the tub. Once in her room, she got her phone and connected it. "Hey, April, How's it going?" Simon Miles greeted her as the call connected. April was impressed by how clear the call was. It felt like he was just next door. "It's going. Thanks again for your help the other night. I still don't know what to do about Kevin. I guess I'll just leave him be. I appreciate you being there for me." "You're welcome. Any news on anyone else?" "Just one. I overheard some other dancers talking about having pictures of people. They could be harmless, but I have a feeling they aren't. They've been bringing different couples to their rooms every night. And what kind of pictures do you take when you're in that situation? It might be some sort of blackmail, but it doesn't seem very solid. What if people can't be pressured or don't feel ashamed?" "Yeah, that's what I thought too," Simon replied. April laughed. Simon was British and had moved when he was 17, but he could easily switch to the accent whenever he wanted. "I'm not a thing, Simon," she teased back. "Oh, sorry, April. Didn't mean to. Fine." "Is that what we're doing?" he asked, sensing her tone. "So if this is just blackmail, they must be up to some pretty tricky stuff in there to pull that off. I mean, it takes a lot to rob a bank, right?" "I think so. Are there any surprises we should know about?" "You have a wild imagination, Simon. That's why I like you, not that I know of. So what do you plan to do?" "Well, there's really only one thing left after all. We're almost done here." "What is it then?" "Win them over." As night fell, things started off quietly. Couples emerged from their rooms, dressed lightly. Brenda was in a sundress that was quite sheer, and it was obvious she chose not to wear anything underneath. John was just in shorts and had skipped a shirt. Bridget wore a dress that wrapped around her. April thought it looked good. Bridget was fuller-figured, and she wore outfits that were flattering. April admired her confidence and how she didn't care about others' opinions. Her husband, Brad, wore pressed khaki shorts and a snug white shirt. Not the best choice for the heat, and he was already sweating. Earlier that day, April had given massages to both Brad and Bridget. She was surprised by how strong Brad's muscles were. Even after their earlier activities, it was clear he worked out regularly. Sal and Mark arrived next, chatting animatedly about a recent sports event. Paula and Mike Woods walked in. April watched from the bar, noting Paula's lively demeanor. Interestingly, she was the only person April hadn't given a massage. Paula was too busy mingling with the men, and her body language hinted at some potential issues in her relationship. Finally, Kim and Rashid Patel came out. April saw how hard Rashid was trying to fit in. He wore long trunks while Kim had a breezy dress over her swimsuit. She seemed relaxed, while Rashid appeared a bit uneasy, though he was clearly fit. Then there was Tom, who looked at April shyly before settling down alone, observing everyone. Mario was busy cooking on the grill, and Martin pulled out an acoustic guitar. It felt like the night would be a relaxed gathering, and it was. April shifted between giving massages and serving drinks. She noticed couples pairing off Kim was no longer in sight, and Mark had also vanished. Rashid was deep in conversation, chatting and playfully connecting with Brenda Roque. John didn't seem to mind, as he was busy talking with both Astrid and Sam, who joined him for a while. Tom spent an hour in the hot tub talking with Sal before Sal wandered off to chat with Kim and Rashid Patel, who also disappeared for about half an hour. Throughout the evening, people came and went. April stayed in one place except for a brief visit with Paula and Mike Woods. She had been sitting at the bar chatting with Martin when Paula and Mike approached them. They looked at Martin, who took the cue and left. They then asked April if she had a moment for a private chat. April thought about her options. She had plans and wanted to feel fresh for them, but she was curious about this couple. After considering her choices, she decided to give it a try. She smiled and said, "Sure." She set her drink aside, hopped off her stool, and walked with them to their room. The experience turned out to be less exciting than she had anticipated. It wasn't that Mike or Paula were lacking in skill, but they didn't quite match each other's energy. Their styles clashed, which made it hard to create the connection she hoped for. At one point, she found herself in an awkward position between Mike and Paula. While Mike was focused on one thing, Paula had her face in a position that made it uncomfortable for April to fully engage. She had to ask Mike to adjust himself since it was a little painful at times. Later, April found herself inadvertently leaning on Paula's hair while things progressed. She had to admit that Mike had good stamina, even if he didn't quite measure up to some others she had been with. There were many moments where things paused and restarted, and it soon became clear that Paula and Mike seemed more interested in each other. They shifted to a position that left April on the sidelines, so she decided to get up and let them continue, feeling relieved that the encounter hadn't become too intense. As the night went on, it was nice to see Paula and Mike connecting more. It turned out they were quite compatible, even if some jealousy lingered. By midnight, the party began to slow down. People were leaving one by one, and it was decided that nearly everyone would go home, leaving April to lock up the bar while Astrid and Sam cleaned up. In the end, only Mario, Martin, Astrid, Sam, and April remained at the bar, enjoying a quiet drink. April poured each of them a generous serving of Grand Marnier, a fitting choice for the end of the night. They sat and talked for a while until Mario decided to leave, followed by Martin after some time. That left April, Sam, and Astrid. "To another day with these people," said Astrid, raising the last of her drink. "I'll toast to that," replied April, mirroring her gesture. Sam raised her glass too, and they all finished their drinks, feeling the warmth as it slid down. They enjoyed a comfortable silence for a moment until Sam said, "Wow, I'm tired." They all chuckled at that, and April agreed, "Yeah, me too." Astrid clicked her tongue and remarked, "Well, it's all for a good reason." She paused, then added, "The good reason of getting paid." "Absolutely," said Sam, clinking her empty glass against Astrid's. April had her hands resting on the bar, holding her glass, spinning it lightly. "I have to say, I don't think I could handle more excitement right now." Astrid laughed softly. "I need something a little calmer, you know?" April was gazing at her glass, but she felt the shift in attention. "Is that so?" Astrid asked gently. Slowly, April raised her eyes to meet Astrid's and whispered, "Yes." It felt like a pivotal moment. April recognized it, and so did Sam and Astrid. But somehow it didn't seem to matter. A noticeable tension filled the air, a kind of electric charge. April had asked without saying it directly and was waiting for a response. Perhaps it was the end of a long week, the fatigue, the drinks, but for some reason everyone felt a little on edge. Astrid glanced at Sam, who was watching April closely. There was a moment of silence. Then Sam reached out to take April's hand and said softly, "You have such beautiful hair and smooth skin." She gently stroked the back of April's hand, sending a shiver through her. April was surprised. She thought she would be the one doing the charming. Sam leaned in closer, looking deeply into April's eyes, and inhaled softly by her ear. "And you smell wonderful, too. How do you do that?" April stayed still, curious to see where this would lead, though she already had an idea. Besides, she felt so drawn in at that moment that moving didn't seem necessary. She might act on a sudden idea. Sam shifted back slightly, held eye contact with April, and leaned forward slowly to press her lips against April's. It was a small but exciting connection. After pulling away, Sam licked her lip and looked over at Astrid, who was watching them intently, just like April. "She tastes sweet, like strawberries. Really nice, just as I imagined." With that, she turned back to April and leaned in for another kiss. This time, though, it was more passionate. What started as a gentle kiss turned deeper, with their lips opening and their movements becoming more eager as they kissed. The kiss grew more intense. Sam's hand moved to cradle April's head, bringing them closer. April welcomed this. She felt a spark within her that surprised her. While she had been with others before, this feeling was new. She felt less in control of her response. She realized she was ready for an exciting evening. She was drawn to both women. When Sam and April finally stopped kissing, April was a bit breathless and flushed. Sam glanced at Astrid, who was now watching them closely. "My turn," Astrid said with a playful smile. Sam leaned back and April remained seated as Astrid walked over to stand in front of her. Astrid took a moment to look intently at April. Then she leaned in, holding April's face gently to urge her to stand. They were almost the same height, meeting each other's gaze. Astrid pulled April closer to her and kissed her softly. April felt a rush of excitement, almost overwhelming. She could feel the heat rising within her. She was fully aware that her reactions were fueled by all that had happened recently, the events of the last few days, the closeness with these two, and the drinks they had shared. But in that moment, all she wanted was to enjoy the experience. Astrid pressed her lips to April's, their kiss becoming more intense. April responded eagerly, pulling Astrid closer. She barely registered Sam encouraging Astrid, but it didn't matter. Their kiss continued, with April embracing Astrid tightly. Eventually, Astrid pulled away, her eyes filled with energy. She looked at Sam and said breathlessly, "Let's go to my room." April felt herself being pulled along by Astrid's firm grip, Sam following close behind as they made their way through the island's quiet corridors. Once they reached her room, Astrid let her go just long enough for April to open the door. Inside, they all paused briefly, glancing at one another as if deciding what would happen next. In a burst of shared energy, they embraced warmly, laughter and friendly banter filling the room. The excitement and camaraderie of the moment had each of them grinning, creating a sense of closeness that April hadn't expected. In the flow of the evening, they relaxed and unwound, the walls between them seeming to melt away. As the night wore on, April felt an unusual level of excitement and focus, a surge of energy she couldn't quite explain. She went to grab a drink of water and noticed that her heightened state of euphoria might be more than natural. Realizing she'd likely been given something earlier, she paused for a moment, a bit surprised at herself for not noticing sooner, but accepting that it was too late to change anything now. In the room, Astrid and Sam exchanged warm smiles with April, their playful energy making the evening feel light-hearted and fun. They beckoned her to join them back on the bed, and she smiled, finding herself unexpectedly at ease and willing to simply enjoy the moment. She set down the glass of water and walked back to the bed. For the next hour, the women enjoyed each other's company. They shared intimate moments. During one exchange, Sam playfully bit on April's skin while Astrid supported Sam from behind. April knew she would have a mark from that playful bite. At another time, April was leaning over Astrid, trying to connect with both of them using a special toy. It was tricky to keep everything in the right position, and more than once it was difficult to maintain the right angle. Adding to the challenge was Sam's playful teasing as well. Later, April watched as Sam and Astrid used toys with each other, both on all fours and back-to-back, sharing the experience together. Both seemed lost in their own feelings. In that moment, April wondered if they might be under the influence of something. But eventually, everyone grew tired. The constant excitement was exhausting. First, Sam lay back and closed her eyes, then Astrid followed, falling asleep soon after. April fought to stay awake, splashing water on her face to keep alert. This was what she had wanted, even if the situation was less than perfect. Searching a room where the others were sleeping was not ideal, and she wasn't even sure what she was really looking for, aside from a memory card. Although exhausted, she pushed on to complete her task. In the end, it was surprisingly easy. She found a small wooden box in the bottom of Astrid's suitcase. Inside was a camera memory card and a small pack of 6 vials filled with a clear liquid. She looked at the vials for a moment and then decided to take them. She had already seen the camera they used and checked it for pictures, but the memory card was empty. Quickly, she switched it with the one she found, and to her surprise, nearly 300 images appeared, showing various couples in intimate situations. She felt she had found a treasure. Taking a chance, she put the empty memory card back in the wooden box and closed it, knowing they might notice the missing vials. There wasn't much she could do, but she looked around for something to put the vials into. Eventually, she discovered a Ziploc bag that contained some pills, yellow capsules that she guessed were fish oil. She emptied the pills into the toilet, then carefully poured the contents of each vial into a small bag, making sure to seal it tightly. She planned to make it more secure later in her cabin. While she was busy, she heard Astrid snort and shift in her sleep, hitting her hand on the bed frame. April froze, hoping Astrid wouldn't wake up. After several tense minutes, Astrid's breathing relaxed again, allowing April to finish her task with the vials. Next, she filled the empty vials with water and placed them back in the wooden box, along with the camera memory card. Holding the bag gently, she scanned the room to ensure nothing looked out of place. Satisfied that everything was as she had found it, she carefully removed the hidden listening device and opened the door as quietly as she could before stepping through and closing it behind her. Letting out a breath of relief, she tiptoed down the hallway to her room. After stepping inside, she quickly searched for something to store the bag with the vial liquid, finding a small travel soap container. Then she collapsed onto her bed, feeling exhausted. The next day would be busy clients leaving in the morning and most of the staff in the afternoon. April made her first call after waking up, excited to share what she had discovered. Before calling, she grabbed her tablet and inserted the memory stick she had taken the night before to view more pictures. As she looked through them, she realized there were clear signs of potential blackmail. It puzzled her how images of people simply being adventurous could compel them to compromise their careers. She thought there had to be something more, but the photos indeed indicated that kind of behavior. The images contained what many would consider unusual. Several men appeared in compromising situations, and the women seemed to be engaging in activities involving their partners. It was clear from their expressions that they were enjoying themselves. April suspected they might have been under the influence of something, like she had been the previous night. But that wasn't obvious just from the images. After reviewing everything, she picked up the satellite phone and called Ingram's. "Hey, everyone," she said after exchanging greetings. "April, how's it going?" Simon Miles responded. "Simon, it's great to hear from you. We were on standby all night just in case the troublemaker turned out to be connected to you. I'm not sure if Dermot updated you." "Yeah, he mentioned it. I appreciate your support, Simon. I owe you one." "Glad to hear it wasn't needed. I'd rather not have interrupted my fishing trip." April could hear him smiling through the phone. "I think I've got a lead. I'm pretty sure it involves the 2 escorts here. I have recordings of them discussing what seems like blackmail material, and I've got a memory stick with some pretty risky pictures on it, at least risky by bank manager standards." "Are you sure about this, April? We've had one mistake already." Simon was being careful, and April understood. "While I'm not completely certain it's them, I really don't think it could be anyone else. Plus, I found some vials of something we'll need to check what it is when I get back. I believe they were planning to quietly give this stuff to some people here. It could be some kind of virus. Either way, I got everything I could find and replaced it with water. They might have more, so I have to make sure they don't have a chance to use it." "Got it. By the way, we're coming to pick you up this afternoon. We secured the boats they usually use, so we'll be there. Just thought you'd like to know." "That's great, Simon. Thanks. I can finally relax once I leave this island and not worry all the way home. That takes a lot off my mind." "Okay, I'll call Dermot and the crew back home to update them. Keep an eye on things, April. We'll see you soon. Stay safe." "Thanks. I can't wait to see you." April felt lifted by the news. Breakfast felt a bit uncomfortable. April went to the bar to start the coffee just before Astrid arrived. She gave April a knowing look and a big smile. Soon after, Sam came in, yawning. She was dressed differently, so she must have gone back to her cabin. April received a small smile from Sam as she handed her a cup of coffee. The breakfast was quiet. Everyone seemed either to have hangovers or felt embarrassed about their actions since arriving on the island, or sometimes both. Conversations were short and soft. Most people just ate and kept to their own thoughts. No one mentioned the previous night. Tom Smith tried his best to avoid looking at April, spending his time making jokes with Sal Giordano. For April, it was kind of funny. Astrid and Sam kept gently suggesting that she enjoy the morning sun and let them handle the bar for a while. Polite but firm, she thanked them and, with a smile, went back to serving coffee, tea, and orange juice to the guests. As time went on, Astrid and Sam became more anxious. Finally, while April was chatting with Brenda and John Roque, she noticed Astrid behind the bar, doing something with the orange juice jug. After a few more minutes and one last appointment for a massage for John, April got up and headed back to the bar. She saw Bridget Flashman coming over with an empty glass, clearly looking to refill. April smiled brightly and picked up the juice jug, but then it slipped from her hands. She had filled the vials with water instead of juice, wanting to be careful. The sound of glass shattering echoed loudly, and soon after she heard slow clapping from the single guys. Embarrassed, she looked around at the small tables filled with people watching her. For a moment, her eyes met Astrid's, whose face looked shocked, much too dramatic for such a small accident. April made a face at her, as if she couldn't believe her own mistake, and then knelt down to clean up the mess. After this, the main group began to disperse to start packing, as most were leaving that morning. April walked over to the massage table, waiting for John to arrive. He came quickly, and she gave him her last massage. In the corner of her eye, she noticed Astrid and Sam watching from a higher spot. She waved at them. When she finished with John, she politely declined his suggestion for one last activity and returned to her room, locking the door behind her. She didn't want to be caught off guard by either of the other girls. She packed up and was ready to see everyone off by midday as they boarded the Zodiacs. They all promised to cherish their memories of the island and excitedly made plans to meet again, knowing full well that those plans would likely be forgotten. But that's just what you say at the end of a vacation. Afterward, April approached Martin Steele and asked if they could talk. They went back to his cabin where she shared her concerns. She spoke about everything that happened, expressing her worries about what others might hear. She chose to stay with Martin to avoid being alone in her room. With the other clients gone, only 5 people were left on the island, and she felt uneasy being by herself until it was time to leave. They talked for almost 2 hours. Martin was understanding and reassured her that no one would talk about what happened on the island. They all had something to protect, just like her. He also complimented her work. At one moment, he jokingly said, "Almost enough to turn me straight," which made her laugh and accidentally spit out her Diet Coke. Then it was time to go. They could hear the Zodiacs returning to pick them up. They shared a brief hug, and soon after, April returned to her cabin. While everyone else was busy carrying their bags to the launch site, she hurriedly moved around the rooms, taking out listening devices. She didn't want to leave them behind and have them found later. Plus, she had signed them out and would need to sign them back in, and she didn't know how much they cost. It took her almost 3 minutes of running around, just as she was getting her rolling luggage ready when Mario returned, looking for her. Then she was on the boat, a different one from Astrid and Sam, smiling at Simon Miles, who was enjoying himself as he drove the boat back to the main land. April sat, looking back at the man-made island and admiring its unique construction until they curved out of the bay where it was located. In a coffee shop, April sipped her hot chai tea, wondering how things had gone wrong for her. Both Laura Ingrams and Dermot praised her, telling her she had done a great job. The bank owner and the board of directors were thrilled. They had earned their fee without a doubt. The board was praising Ingrams and Associates, and the people from Pinkerton were maintaining their serious expressions while saying nice things, even though they seemed unhappy. Everyone appeared pleased. So why, April wondered, did she feel down? Why did it feel like she had failed? Tom Patterson made it clear he thought the mission was a success. Even though Pinkerton mentioned they didn't expect a conviction because there was little evidence proving the girls were tied to the previous robberies. While there was some circumstantial evidence, it couldn't be used in court. At the end of the day, all they had was the info that if they wanted the robberies to stop, they needed to look at the girls' connections and keep them away from the annual trips to the island. Patterson was fine with that. He hadn't expected to recover the lost money and had most of it reimbursed by his insurance company anyway. He was just glad to know who was responsible. Pinkerton indicated they would keep an eye on the girls for a while to see who they spoke to. If nothing came up in a month or two, they would approach them. They would make it clear that they knew what was happening and warn them firmly, hoping that would be enough to stop future robberies. They had followed the false trail the girls had set. Interestingly, Astrid and Sam were their real names, but their past included blackmail, petty theft, and 1 case of robbery. They had each spent time in a prison in Ohio, and after that, they began a career in dance. April had been right about her suspicions of their past when she saw them on the island. But April was still not happy. It might have had something to do with that last night. She knew she had not done well on her assignment. Being used by those girls was unacceptable to her. She hadn't been in charge, and she recognized that. As far as she knew, no other agent had lost control like she had. At least no one had spoken up about it. She realized she had been given a mix of drugs, which played a big part in what happened, but she was a professional. She should have either seen it coming or been ready so it wouldn't happen. But it did. Not that she hadn't liked it. In fact, she discovered she could enjoy being with women more than she expected. But still, it didn't feel right. She was unhappy, and it frustrated her that those 2 girls and whoever else was involved would face no consequences. It upset her sense of fairness, and she knew there was little she could do about it. She was a counselor, not an action hero, but the feeling still stung. She sat in a Starbucks alone at a small table, trying to figure out how to move on, while watching the rain fall in downtown Washington, D.C. She smiled at that. Just last week, she had been trying to escape the stifling heat. She felt far away from that life now. Her thoughts were interrupted as a shadow fell across her. She looked up to see Astrid, whose expression was not just happy but almost smug. Next to Astrid was Samantha, and behind them stood a large man with thinning hair and a strong jaw. He was very big, nearly 6'4" and over 275 pounds, if she had to guess. He clearly spent a lot of time working out, with strong neck and arms. Although she was surprised to see them, her first thought about him was how it would feel to give him a massage. She wondered if she could help those big muscles relax. She turned her gaze to Samantha, who wore a similar expression as Astrid. "Hello, Tara. Or should I say April," Astrid said in a smooth tone, as if she knew she had the advantage. April looked back at Astrid, who claimed the chair across from her. Sam dragged a chair from another table, while the large man took a chair from a nearby table, causing the people there to stare. Neither did he, and he pulled the chair over to the table. Realizing there was no room for him there, he turned the chair around and squeezed it between Astrid and Sam, then sat on it sideways. From this little scene, April understood that this man was the heavy and definitely not the smartest one around. She shifted her focus to Astrid, wondering how much she should hide her true self. They clearly knew who she really was. "It's nice to see you, Astrid. Sam, aren't you going to introduce me to your big friend here?" she asked. The big man grinned at being called big and replied in a deep voice, "You haven't seen anything yet, lady. I'm big everywhere." This told April two things. First, he probably used steroids, as a deep voice often comes from that. Secondly, he seemed proud of his size, mistaking it for strength. Long-term steroid use can also cause unexpected effects, like shrinking certain body parts. Since they were in a public place, April felt somewhat safe teasing him. At best, it would disrupt their little group, and at worst, it might just annoy him where he couldn't react. She was also curious to see how the others would respond to him. Would they speak up? "Really?" she laughed. "I doubt that. Steroids come with some pretty nasty effects," she said, playfully waving her pinky for emphasis. She noticed Sam trying not to smile, and the boastful smile quickly faded from the big man's face, replaced by an angry frown. He started to rise but paused when Astrid placed her hand on his arm and shook her head. His eyes narrowed, but he sank back down, glaring at April. "Now, April, teasing Gray isn't a wise move. He doesn't have the same self-control as you or I," Astrid cautioned, directing her attention back to April, clearly showing she knew her name. "Plus, we have a lot to discuss about you and us," she added, keeping a smile on her face. Astrid nodded to Sam and said, "Sam, could you please get us some coffee?" "The usual. April, do you need anything?" "No, I see you have a full cup." Sam nodded and headed over to the counter. "Now, April, I think we got off on the wrong foot. Or tongue, if you like to think that way," Astrid joked awkwardly. "I believe you and I could reach some understanding. But first, how are you feeling? Have you recovered from last night? That was quite an experience." April thought about her situation. These people clearly weren't trained, or they wouldn't have approached April in a public place or left her phone unattended on the table. It wasn't recording, but picking it up now would make it obvious something was off. They weren't following the usual rules, and it showed. Because they seemed inexperienced, it was doubtful they knew much about her job. It was clear they thought she was some sort of investigator, but what were they doing here trying to provoke her? Her cover story wasn't that complex. The information they had was genuine, belonging to someone else, but she hadn't acted in line with that story since her return. Finding out who she really was wouldn't be hard. They just needed to follow her home and check her mailbox. She had simply never thought anyone would. A few thoughts crossed her mind, but she decided that playing along for now was the best plan. She could hear them out and decide what to do next. This decision came quickly, and for the next few seconds, April acted like someone who felt uneasy and didn't know how to respond, hoping to convey a sense of nervousness to Astrid and her friends. "It was remarkable," she finally replied. "Good. I'm pleased you're feeling okay. That particular mix of, well, helpful items can often leave people a bit disoriented for a while. April just stared at her. Silence filled the air as everyone waited for someone to speak. Astrid was the first to break the quiet. "Well then, let's get to business. I respect your straightforwardness, April," she said. April noticed that Astrid's way of speaking had changed significantly since her time on the island. There, she had been softer with a hint of a southern drawl, but now her words were sharp, clear, and lacked any accent. Astrid was turning out to be quite unpredictable. "What do you want?" April asked. "There you go, direct and clear. What do we want?" "So many things, April, but in this case—" At that moment, Sam returned to the table, balancing 3 cups of coffee. "Thanks, Sam. Now back to what we want. To explain, when you took that memory stick from the camera along with the vials and the water was a smart idea. By the way, you unintentionally disrupted a valuable project that our group and some associates were working on. Basically, you threw a wrench in the works for all of us. If we had known you were the one with the memory stick and vials, we would have gotten them back. Now, some in our group are quite upset about this. A lot of time and effort went into that project, and it has all fallen apart now. Some people think you should face consequences, but I believe we can turn this mess into something good." Astrid paused and took a sip of her coffee, making a face at the taste or the heat of it. "So, how do we turn this little problem around? And there you are." April leaned back and thought about everything happening. This version of Astrid was very different from the relaxed person she was on the island. April realized she had underestimated Astrid on purpose and had really only gotten one over her by chance. The memory stick and the vials were important. She understood what was inside those vials now, since the one she had taken back home in a cleaned-out perfume bottle had revealed its secrets. Both she and her client recognized how this group managed to get what they wanted using 2 main methods. One was through manipulation and fear, using pictures for blackmail. If that didn't work, they relied on a fake illness story. The vials contained a small amount of a cold virus, nearly harmless, but enough to make someone feel sick for a few days after a short wait. Just enough time for someone returning from a vacation in the South Pacific to get home to Northern California or Washington State. While they had not confirmed it yet, Pinkerton and Ingrams believed that the group was using 2 strategies. One was blackmail using embarrassing pictures, and if that didn't do the trick, they made people think they were infected with a mysterious illness, claiming they had the cure. They created fear in their victims, even though the symptoms would go away on their own. It was likely they would use urgency as a threat, saying things like, "You need to act now or you'll be in serious trouble. Don't bother talking to doctors, it will be too late." In a way, it was clever. Owning the pictures wasn't against the law. If anyone went to the police, they would recover in a few days, leaving no proof of wrongdoing. They might face a minor punishment, but no one could really link them to anything, and they could just continue their scheme with someone new. The key was the retreat on the island. The guests were easy targets for this type of trickery. Usually reserved people seeking a getaway in the sun, they would let loose, drink, and enjoy a safe space that encouraged them to be more open, surrounded by planned entertainment. They had always managed to succeed each year in their plans to influence one of the bank managers. Then April came along and changed everything, taking away the materials they used to coerce others. Astrid was clearly annoyed, but what did they want from her? They seemed to have realized that April wasn't who she claimed to be, but what did they think she truly was? There was only one way to find out. Astrid leaned in closer and spoke softly, making sure April was listening closely. "So, April, I'm sure you've imagined many possible scenarios by now. Here's the situation. You disrupted an operation that worked well for us for years until you arrived. You seemed to be an agent for some group, here to interfere with our plans. And you did, so well done. But because of that, there's a cost. You need to help us fix the mistake you caused." April sat in silence, looking at Astrid with confusion. "Why?" she asked simply. Astrid smiled back. "That tea you've been sipping. You think it's just tea? You've consumed something stronger than you realize, but don't just take my word for it. Get your blood tested." This didn't sound reassuring to April. She knew what they used would never pass scrutiny. Either this was a big bluff, or she was genuinely in trouble. "What?" she asked, trying to seem anxious. "What did you do to me?" "What do you think? Just a little something to encourage your cooperation. Don't look so worried. We can fix it with another potion. Just make sure you act quickly. It could get a bit complicated." April thought about her situation. They could be bluffing, but if they were, they must know she would realize it. There were ways to determine the truth, and thankfully, she had access to them. Either way, it was a troubling situation, and she decided to play along, acting nervous. "What did you give me? Please tell me." Astrid smiled. "In due time. We know you are some kind of investigator. We're not sure for whom, but I have a feeling it's for one of those secretive organizations. What we want is access to you. More specifically, we need your help in finding a good opportunity to reallocate resources, shall we say. Since you blocked one of our sources, it's your job to help us find a new one. We believe you might have valuable information, something we can use to strengthen our position." "Like what?" April asked, curious about what they thought she knew. "Oh, I really can't say, but I trust you'll discover something. Act as if your future depends on it. Take a look at some old case files or find a company with a lot of money. It doesn't matter which one, just make sure we can visit it without attracting too much attention." April sat quietly, staring at Astrid without blinking. Astrid reached out and gave her hand a gentle pat. "Everything will be all right, April. Just go along with us, give us a bit of help, and everything will be okay. You'll see. Once this is over, maybe we can plan another fun night." April felt surprised by the touch. She had to hold back physically reacting, and Astrid noticed how still she became, smiling knowingly. Inside, April was frustrated with herself for losing focus. She was the expert, not Astrid. She was meant to be in charge. "Oh, you remember it. So do I, and so does Sam. None of us have seen a reaction like yours before. I wish we had a video of that moment. To be honest, I've never felt like that before when someone was in action. I'm curious if we could recreate that feeling later. What do you think, April?" Astrid lightly traced her fingers on April's hand and forearm. She smiled warmly, seemingly inviting. April recognized the technique Astrid was using. It was a classic method to entice someone by creating desire and then instilling doubt about backing out. Someone with less strength might easily get caught up in this. They might convince themselves that they had to go along with it based on what was at stake. "Now, why don't you go get your blood tested or whatever you need to do? Just keep it private. We wouldn't want your job to be at risk, would we? If your employer finds out, you could lose your position quickly, and that wouldn't benefit either of us. Keep that in mind. We'll contact you soon." With that, Astrid stood up gracefully, nodded at Sam and the imposing man behind her, and walked out, still holding her coffee, without looking back. April released a breath she didn't realize she was holding. After a moment, she stood up, carefully picked up her cup, and focused on the lawyers in the coffee shop, hoping to recognize them again. If something was in her drink, it had to be one of them. As she walked out, her mind was racing. She was frustrated about being found out, though she knew it was her own fault. At the same time, she felt a rush of excitement. If she took this back to Ingram's, she wondered what they would do to Sam and Astrid. Ingram's was a place for help, not a spy organization. What could they really do? But part of April wanted Astrid and Sam to face the consequences. So what should she do? "Are you sure about this?" asked the quiet woman wearing big glasses and a white coat. She pushed her glasses back up her nose and scratched her head, where her hair was tied up. This made her face look a bit strained. "Yes, I'm sure, Wendy. I need a blood test and an analysis of the tea in that cup." Wendy pressed her lips together and looked closely at April. "Is this official? Should I be writing a report?" April gave her friend a tired smile and replied, "No, I just need something checked. There might be something in the tea that's making me feel sick, and I need you to look into it. It doesn't need to be official. Actually, it's better if it's not. Come on, Wendy, you owe me this." Wendy actually did owe April a lot. They met when April was delivering official items from Ingram's to the company where Wendy worked. Wendy was the head lab technician at a place that did tests for the police and FBI, analyzing things like fibers and blood stains. Ingram's also contacted her for DNA tests when they were needed. Wendy was the connection for Ingram's. and even though April was a field officer who usually wasn't the one delivering items, she often picked up the results. They got along well, and a few months later, after some drinks and dinners together, Wendy asked April for help. Wendy knew April was a trained therapist and asked her to help with her younger sister, who was going down a bad path. Both women were orphans, having lost their parents in a car accident years before. The absence of their parents had affected Wendy's sister much more than it affected Wendy. Her sister had started drinking too much, partying, smoking, and Wendy feared she was not being careful with her choices. When Wendy found an inappropriate video featuring her sister, she knew she had to act. Wendy didn't know all the details of what April did for her job, just that she was a trained therapist. This fact came out when April mentioned that DNA doesn't determine mental health and what that needs. In the end, Wendy turned to April for help, unsure who else to ask. They had shared coffee, and April listened closely to Wendy as she spoke. Once Wendy found someone who would listen, she opened up, and April reassured her that she was making the right choice and that she would help. After nearly a week, April managed to get Janie Slater into a rehabilitation center. Wendy could not understand how April had done it since her own attempts to talk to Janie had ended in laughter. What she didn't know was that April took Janie on a day trip to show her the reality of her choices. They visited places that highlighted the serious consequences of the path Janie was on. April's efforts truly made Janie want to change. This had happened a year ago, and since then, April became one of Wendy's favorite people. She even taught April how to cook. They enjoyed evenings out watching people, and Wendy felt at ease with her friend. One night, after they had both finished a bottle of wine, April gently asked Wendy about her single status. Wendy admitted that her 2 attempts at relationships had not gone well. She felt too unsure and lacked confidence to put herself out there. April laughed along with her, and they spent the rest of the night joking about the guys trying to flirt with them in the bar. So when April asked Wendy for a favor, Wendy was ready to help. It was something she could do. "Just leave me the sample and I'll run as many tests as I can think of. I'll let you know tomorrow since it will take time for the results," Wendy said. April smiled and kissed Wendy on the cheek. "You really are a lifesaver." Then she left, and Wendy found herself wondering what was happening, as April seemed more anxious than usual. "Hey, Dermot!" April called out from the doorway of Dermot's office, trying to act playfully. Dermot, sitting at his desk and busy with his iPad, looked up. April entered the room, carrying 2 glasses and a bottle of fine brandy. Dermot set his iPad down, but not before April noticed he was playing a game. He adjusted his glasses and smiled at her. With his white hair and prominent nose, Dermot looked a bit scruffy. April had observed that his facial hair grew quickly. He could still look like he had 5 o'clock shadow, even after a morning shave, since his hair was white. "April!" exclaimed Dermot, lowering his feet from the desk. "What brings you here today?" April sat down in the easy chair across from Dermot's desk. She set down the drinks and busied herself pouring 2 glasses. "Can a girl enjoy a drink with an old friend once in a while?" she asked, looking sweetly at Dermot while she adjusted the amounts in the glasses. Dermot looked at her closely and replied, "The day you want a friendly drink with me is the day I quit my job and start a garden. Some girls can hang out with an old friend. You're not one of them." April laughed and handed him a glass. Dermot glanced at the clock and noticed it was past 9, an unusual time for April to still be at the office when she wasn't working on a case. He swirled the drink in the glass and took a sniff. "Ah, Courvoisier Napoleon, right?" he asked. Silently, April leaned forward and turned the bottle toward him so he could see the label. Good to know I still recognize my brandies," he said, taking a sip. "Oh, it's very nice. So what do you want? I know it's not just for a friendly chat." April took a sip from her glass. "How do you know? I could have an interest in older men." Dermot set his glass down and replied with a smirk. "Oh, please. What do you really want?" "Well," April was enjoying this. It was rare for her to tease Dermot in a light-hearted way, and she was making the most of it. Dermot tilted his head. "About that last case." Dermot groaned and leaned back in his chair, forgetting the drink. "I should have guessed. It doesn't sit well, does it?" he said, his Scottish accent becoming more noticeable. She made a face back at him. "No, I didn't expect it would. It bothered me, too. So I was curious. Do we have a Pinkerton contact for this? Dermot immediately looked wary. Why? What do you want to know that for? Just curious. April took another thoughtful sip of her drink, pretending to be lost in her own thoughts. Dermot just watched her, a silence hanging in the air between them. Oh, if you must know, April said with a little pout, I feel I should be involved. These people need to be warned in a certain way. I shouldn't just be the one writing reports. I've met them. I know them well. Dermot considered her request, and April noted the moment he was thinking it over. She pressed on. Dermot, these people have caused a lot of trouble. They will only get a light punishment. We need to intimidate them. I can help. My insights could make a difference. You know it will. Dermot pursed his lips, sensing there was more to her request than she was letting on. There was always something going on when April was involved. It was like a puzzle with many pieces, as a favorite author once described. April truly embodied that. However, what she said had some truth to it. April, I'll give you the name. Just don't make any promises with Ingram's name attached. But first, let me share a story. He picked up the glass, looked at the amber liquid, took a sip, and then held the glass close to him. Many years ago, I had a friend who worked as a field agent for the DEA. He was a good guy, really smart and skilled at his job. He had one deal that went wrong and the suspects got away, which frustrated him. He spent a lot of time trying to find them and even took a promotion just for access to some important databases. It turned out he spent almost every moment during that promotion focusing on this case. He didn't mind. He found those responsible and took them in. But it had a price. He lost his job and that promotion, and even though he earned respect from his colleagues, it meant he could never do that kind of work again. His need to finish the job cost him the chance to keep working in that field. Are you following me, April? Dermot stared intently at April over his glass. She took another sip, smiled gently at him, and replied, Of course, Dermot. I'm just glad there aren't any other databases around here. Dermot sighed, realizing his message was heard but not heeded. So be it. It was April's choice. April's phone buzzed while she was briskly walking along the Washington Mall. She hadn't had a chance to exercise that morning, so she took a long lunch, trying to dodge tourists and other important people who were enjoying the rare sunshine in Washington, D.C. She stopped, found an empty bench, sat down, and answered the call. Hey, April, it's Wendy. Can you talk? Wendy, thanks for getting back to me so quickly. So, what's the news? This blood sample is pretty unusual. There's something in it that I had to look up. Really? What kind of thing? Well, if I read this right, it seems to be a modified version of a flu vaccine, made much stronger. At first I thought it was some exotic illness or virus. That's what it looked like. But as I looked deeper, I realized it didn't match any of the usual ones. After a lot of searching, April couldn't help but notice the emphasis on this. She knew Wendy had been up all night. I traced it back to an experimental flu vaccine from the research labs at Johns Hopkins. I was fortunate. I have a friend from college who works there, and I reached out to her. She pointed me to this vaccine. This matches up, but it's really strong. Is it harmful? Well, anything can be harmful in big amounts, even oxygen. But no, what I'm seeing shows that the person could have some flu-like symptoms. They might feel achy, have a fever, and some stomach issues. It would last about a week, maybe 10 days. The interesting part is how it looks under a microscope. It seems like a man-made virus, kind of strange and off-putting. It reminds me of something from a science fiction story. But it's not fatal. It will go away on its own. Absolutely. It won't be fun in the meantime, though. Wendy, you just made my day. Thank you so much. You're welcome. How about drinks sometime? Definitely, my friend. Definitely. That eased April's mind. She had suspected that the small group had just ramped up their usual method with something stronger, and she was right. Now she could stop worrying and start planning. To begin, a phone call, another dinner meeting. This time, April chose to dress more casually. This would be hard, but she honestly didn't know any other way to approach it. She needed his help, and she needed what he could offer. She didn't know how happy he would be to see her, but her plan depended on this. With a touch of makeup and a light fragrance, she found herself waiting at a table in Panera Bread, sipping from a bowl of chicken and rice soup and looking out the window waiting for him to arrive. She wasn't feeling her best. The flu symptoms were kicking in, and she had taken as much cold medicine as she could handle. When he finally showed up, he nodded without stopping, went to the counter, ordered food, got a drink, and sat down. She noticed how he did everything and understood the message she came second now. Got it, she thought, trying to smile at him. No reason for him to leave. Hello, April. You look nice today. Great tan. Did you go somewhere sunny? Raph asked as he sat across from her. South Pacific, she replied, placing both hands on the table, palms down. Studies showed that showing your hands in that way can ease the conversation. Wow, you didn't waste time, did you? Was he attractive? Raph asked flatly, with a hint of bitterness. They were very nice, thank you, April said, emphasizing the first word. Just part of my job. Well, this is nice, Raph said, looking around as if bored and uninterested. But what do you want, April? Have you changed your mind? Want to marry me and start a family? April just looked at him, her head tilted, her expression unchanged. No, I didn't think so. What brings you here? Raph asked again, still scanning the room and not meeting April's eyes. She could see through it all. This was a man in distress, a man who felt let down, a man who was having this talk because he was too good to walk away, not because he actually wanted to. Her heart went out to him, and she remembered the wise words Dermot had told her. Taking a moment, she pushed away her plate and folded her hands together as if in prayer. First, I want to say I'm sorry again. I can't give you what you need. I'm not ready to move our relationship further, not now. It hasn't been fair for me to go along with you, knowing it wouldn't lead to more. I hoped this would be enough, and it really was wonderful for me. She gave him a genuine smile. No matter what, she wanted him to know how much she cherished their time together. I'm truly sorry I hurt you, Raph. You're a good man, just going through life, and you'll make someone very happy one day. You made me happy, that's for sure. I just can't be that person right now, and honestly, it's probably for the best. April paused, watching Raph as he focused on her without saying a word. You'll understand more soon when I explain everything. The truth is, I need your help. You're in a special place to assist me with something that's been weighing on my mind. She paused again, looking for his reaction. He remained still, waiting for her to continue like someone ready for a show to begin. What I've shared about my work is true, but it's not the whole story. I am a therapist, and it doesn't matter much who I work for. You know I help people recover from tough family and personal situations. What you don't know is that most of the time, the people I help don't even realize I'm helping them. There was silence for a moment as Raph processed this. What you're telling me is private, right? You could get in trouble for sharing this? He asked carefully. April sighed. Yes, it's confidential, and I could lose my job for telling you, but I think you deserve to know. Generally, when people in power face relationship problems, my group is often called to assist them. They are usually CEOs or those in charge, and most of the time, they wouldn't ask for help on their own. So we find ways to support them. We get involved in their lives and do therapy in their usual environment, so to speak. Often they never even realize we're there to help. Taking a breath, she saw the understanding appear on Raph's face. And some of these personal issues can be sensitive? He asked tentatively. April gave a deep breath before answering. Yes, sometimes they are, she said. So, you help them feel better after someone else has hurt them? Asked Raph. Well, it's more complicated than that, but yes, that's part of it, April admitted. And that's what you were doing when you were away for those times? Helping some important person? Raph leaned in, looking directly at April. She didn't look away. It's not like that, Raph. It's more than just that. It's a meaningful connection for them. I'm here to support them, she explained. By being intimate with them, wow, you really take do no harm to a whole new level, April. Honestly, I don't want to marry you if this is involved. Who knows what that would mean for our life together? Is there training for this? Are you actually trained? This time, April glanced away. This is unbelievable. Trained to help people while keeping it secret. You have a whole new meaning to being undercover, don't you? And you wouldn't stop this to be with me? That makes me feel really insignificant, doesn't it? Are they better than me? Or is it just the thrill of it all? Raph's voice rose in frustration. Raph! April whispered sharply, noticing others looking at them. Lower your voice. Raph leaned back, chuckling to himself. Wow, I feel foolish. I let you go off and be professional, thinking you weren't really serious about it. I have to ask, why even be with me? What's the point? I wouldn't have accepted this if I had known. You knew that, right? Why stay in touch with me at all? Surely you have enough attention in your job. April sighed. She knew Raph's ego would be hurt, but she needed to be honest. That's not really true. Yes, there are moments of closeness, but it's not as if I'm with everyone. Most of the time, it's about comforting someone and helping them heal. The people I work with often have deep issues, and I wouldn't choose to be close to them otherwise. It's just part of my job. With you, though, it's different. Raph looked at the plate the waitress had just brought and then focused back on her. Different how? Everything. I live a lonely life, Raph. I have friends at work who understand what I do, but no one I can truly open up to. Because of that, I keep people at a distance. With you, I didn't have to. I could talk to you about everything, like what goes on at work. I had to keep some things secret, and I think you can see why. You probably wouldn't have stuck around if I told you everything. The truth is, you and the time we spent together meant a lot to me outside of work. I knew it could never be what you wanted, but I thought it might be enough for us. It was what I needed, and honestly, I think you needed it too. You were just ready to take things further than I could. April, I understand how you feel, but the time we had was built on a lie. It was a complicated lie, but still a lie. That changes everything for me. You can see that, right? April paused, took a breath, and tried again. Yes, I see your point. But I wanted to be with someone who cared about me for who I am, not for my job or how I make others feel. Suddenly, Raph's eyes widened. Wait, I'm not one of your clients, am I? Have you been using me too? He asked, surprised. April smiled at his reaction. She hadn't expected that question. No, come on, Raph. You're not a project for me. And just to be clear, I work with important people in big companies, not just anyone. Don't flatter yourself. She said this in a light-hearted way, and it earned her a small smile from him. Seeing that made her feel like they were going to be okay. What you got from me was genuine. I wanted to share that with you. I know I just dropped a big surprise on you, and I get that you need time to think. But I asked you here for another reason. I didn't want to spring this on you without context. There's more? Seriously? Have you met aliens too? He joked. It was good to see him laughing. April felt as if a heavy burden had been lifted from her heart, a weight she hadn't realized she was carrying. Well, some people do seem out of this world, but no aliens here. I need to break a work rule and tell you about my last assignment. She took a sip of her drink and began sharing the details. She explained what had happened, the things she was involved in, everything important. She skipped over some personal details, trusting Raph would understand. It took her nearly 40 minutes, with Raph occasionally asking questions. He was clearly interested and followed her story closely. In the end, he leaned back and said, Wow, April, you really know how to live, don't you? You're like a mix of James Bond and Mata Hari, he said with a grin. She frowned at him but stayed silent. So I get it. There are bad people out there and they're getting away with things. You're upset about this. They've tried to mess with you and now you're here talking to me. Why? What do I have to do with this? This was the important part. I need your help. I need to use your store. Use my what? He asked, confused. Your store. I know you work at a jewelry shop in the mall. I want to use it as a trap. I'm sorry, I think I misunderstood. You want to use my store as a trap for a group of dangerous criminals? Are you serious, April? The company would never allow that. I would never agree to it. You want my team to face off with people like that? Raph looked away in disbelief. It's not like that. I know your store doesn't need to display all the real jewelry. You have a full set of fake stones that look like the real thing for items over $500. Plus, I know you have a secure safe that you close at night. Raph looked even more surprised. How do you know that? Wait, did you look into my store? April knew Raph was sharp. She had often wondered why he only managed a mall store since he picked up on things so quickly. But he was spot on this time. She looked away again. Yes, it's part of my job. Well, isn't that just great? He said. Did you find anything else? I'd love to see that report. Did it mention what I had for breakfast? April knew this would bother Raph. It would bother anyone, really. She would be upset too if someone did that to her. But she hoped he would see it through this time. Most of her information was out now. The next task was to convince him. I'm sorry, Raph. I don't make the rules. Everything was discreet and really nothing was unusual. You're exactly who I thought you were, a good person trying to get ahead. I never saw the report and wouldn't get to. It doesn't work that way. I'm truly sorry. I know it's unfair, but it's part of my job. Yes, when you signed up, April. I don't remember agreeing to such a thing. An awkward silence followed as both of them considered what to say next. Well, you're still here, so there's some hope, April said. Hope for what, April? That you can convince me to let you use my store for a robbery? I can't wait to hear this. Can you explain how you can do this without putting my people at risk and how I should tell the head office? April saw a chance to make her case. What if I could find a way to do everything you need? She asked, her voice filled with hope. I'm curious to hear this. Go on, April, Raph replied, crossing his arms. First, the people in the store wouldn't be your employees. You would be there, but in a separate area. A private security company would handle the front and— Which company? Raph cut in, clearly skeptical. Pinkerton, she answered. And we'd choose a specific time at the end of the day when there are fewer customers. None of your real products would be out, so if something went wrong, they would only get fake items. Even those fake items cost money, April. They're not free. That's not a concern. We can manage that, she said dismissively. The key point is that your team won't be in the store. There won't be anything valuable to steal, and if everything goes well, you come out looking like a hero. Oh, really? How do I explain this to the head office? That my store was watched by Pinkerton agents? That I didn't inform the police or my superiors? April felt a sense of triumph. This part of the conversation was going as she hoped. It's simple. You say you were being blackmailed. They told you they slipped something in your drink, and if you didn't cooperate, you'd be in danger. You didn't contact the police because they said they had someone inside the department. You were scared, so you reached out to Pinkerton directly. I can connect you with their local office and a contact who can support your story. They want to keep my name out of this just as much as you do. You'll get all the credit for handling it, and everyone will be satisfied. And if they get caught and start mentioning you, what happens then? Raph asked, his tone hinting he was trying to expose a flaw in her plan. April held back a smile. She sensed Raph was already leaning towards going along with her idea. They won't, don't you get it? They're already in trouble for robbery. If they start talking about me, it opens up new issues for them and other people they might have involved. They don't want that. They'll face serious time already. Opening that door means they could face even harsher consequences. They won't say anything. Raph remained silent for a moment, then started to eat his soup, which was now nearly cold. April could see he was deep in thought. Who's this contact? I can set up a meeting. Tomorrow, if you like. Raph nodded while continuing his meal. No further words were exchanged. April stood nearby, watching the scene play out. He was quietly eating his soup and avoiding her gaze, while she sat with her hands folded in front of her, filled with hope. She wondered how strange they must appear to others. Finally, he finished his meal, pushed the bowl aside, wiped his mouth, and leaned back to meet April's gaze. A gentle smile appeared on her face, showing her concern. Can I ask something? He broke the silence. Of course. Was I ever good? There it was, the question she had anticipated. She sighed, understanding it was bound to come up. Women, she thought, weren't like men. They didn't compare experiences with others the way men did. Sure, they might think about looks, but the actions themselves were not often compared to what a partner might have with someone else. That tendency belonged to men. Raph, you made me feel special. Don't worry about that. You were honest and passionate in what you did. A woman always remembers that. You shouldn't doubt yourself, and yes, since you're curious, you're just fine in that area. A bit above average, really. There's nothing to feel ashamed of. Everyone has things they can improve on, even me. Raph listened intently, trying to read her expression. Finally, he asked, Things? April chuckled softly. What, do you want a list? He looked away, his expression turning serious. Raph, please don't be so hard on yourself. You wanted more from this. I am not exactly what I might have seemed. It's not your fault. You haven't done anything wrong. You need to stop being so hard on yourself. Now you see why I can't move things further. Once you let go of feeling sorry for yourself, you will understand it better. I think we should keep things as friends for now, but I don't want to mislead you. You deserve more than what I can offer right now. If you're really eager to know what you could work on, I can share, but for now, just remember you did nothing wrong." When Raph looked back at April, she noticed the sadness in his eyes, hurt, pain, and a touch of anger. This was part of her responsibility, something she dealt with often. But when she realized how her choices affected him, it felt different. She felt guilty, knowing she owed him something. Until that moment, she had viewed their relationship as a part of city life, an exchange of give and take that often wasn't ideal, but was simply the way things were. Seeing his pain made her realize that it was her choices that had led to his disappointment. Her choices had led him to believe he could. She needed to take action, though she wasn't sure what to do. Being close with him was not an option, so what could she do? Setting that aside for now, she simply said, "You are a good man, Raph. What time can I bring the Pinkerton agent by?" In the end, it was a bit uneventful, at least compared to action movies. No one jumped through windows, no shots were fired, no car chases took place. April reached out to Astrid through text, using the number she had received. She had been instructed to share some information about the mall store in a secret manner. She spent time crafting a believable report, as if her company was testing the store's security. Her talk with Pinkerton had been tense. They were not fans of Ingram's, but the chance to take down a robbery gang was too tempting. Pinkerton didn't make arrests on their own, so they worked with the local police, keeping April and Ingram's out of the spotlight as she requested. This way, Pinkerton would take all the credit. She scheduled the raid for late evening, when all of Raph's staff could leave, and the Pinkerton agents could take their places. This was a risky move since the gang might notice the new faces, but some things had to be left to chance, especially since Ingram's had no idea what she was planning. Still, she could relax in the food court, enjoying some fast food while keeping an eye on what was happening. The store was located near the food court, which is typical for many jewelry shops. They arrived right at 8:30, wearing masks and holding weapons, coming in from the door next to JCPenney and heading straight for the store. Voices grew louder, and then the area was filled with police and even a SWAT team. An officer asked her to step back, which she did. She wanted to stay unnoticed, but she watched as the gang, now without their masks, were led away in handcuffs. Astrid was there, along with Sam, and the large man from the coffee shop, plus 2 others she didn't recognize. Either way, it was done. There were consequences at work. No one at Ingram's was unaware of what she had done. Dermot and Jessica Ingram's herself confronted her, but the word was out. Some field agents praised her, while others quietly questioned her sense of justice. In the end, Pinkerton received all the credit. Ingram's faded into the background but received a significant bonus from the bank, and April ended up with a warning on her record. As her friend Megan put it, "Who cares? There's no chance to move up here anyway, no better job to get, so who cares?" And April ended up getting double the bonus she was promised. 3 months later, she kept track of the trial involving Astrid, Sam, and the others. Raph was called to the stand, and she found it amusing watching him stretch the truth while under oath. Astrid and the others received 5 years each. April felt uneasy. They would eventually be released and might come looking for her. But that was a worry for later. A month after the trial, April called Raph and invited him to dinner. He came, mostly out of curiosity. April was dressed casually. Raph was in a suit, having just come from work. He had been promoted to area manager because of his role in the robbery incident. His boss was not happy that Raph had acted alone, but after some influence from the higher-ups, he decided it was best to support Raph instead of causing trouble. As a result, Raph was now managing 8 locations and was often away on business. "How are you, April?" he asked, sounding a bit tired as he sat at the bar table with her. She smiled warmly at him. They hadn't spoken since the robbery, even though she'd seen him on TV since then. "I'm good. I have another job coming up soon." "Is it a fun job for you?" he asked, his tone a bit bitter. April's smile faltered slightly, but she wanted to stay positive. "Does it really matter? I'm not here to eat with you." "What do you want then?" Raph asked, looking a bit confused. "I'm not here for dinner," April repeated. "Wendy is—" "Who is Wendy?" Raph asked, clearly not pleased. Someone you should meet. Here she comes." Wendy walked over from the restroom, noticing Raph sitting there, clearly unhappy. "Raph, this is Wendy. Wendy, this is Raph, an old friend. I need to run for work, but you two have dinner, okay? Raph, please stay and don't be upset. Wendy, Raph is a great guy and he's looking to meet someone. Have fun. Bye." Without waiting for a response, April got up and left the bar. Wendy stood there looking at Raph, unsure of what to do. Eventually, Raph broke the silence. "Well, I'm a bit hungry. Are you hungry too?" Wendy nodded, thinking he seemed really nice. "Let's eat then. I wonder how to get a waitress's attention here. Do you think I should dance a little?" Wendy smiled at his joke, feeling more relaxed. She took a seat at the table. "So, Raph, tell me about yourself. April and Ingram's and Associates will come back in American Life.